Chapter 3597. Ning Shu said goodbye and didn't get up to send the city lord out. The city lord of Yun City didn't care at all. He even invited Ning Shu to attend the ceremony, where various sects and clans would select disciples. Ning Shu nodded and said that he would go when he was free. As soon as the city lord of Yun City left, Yao Nyang let go of the rabbit in her hand and patted the rabbit fur on her body. She was a little puzzled. Why did you give me a rabbit? She probably thinks that all girls like these cute little animals. But I don't like it. Then I'm not a girl. Ning Shu said, no, everyone is qualified to like different things and hate something. It has nothing to do with gender. Yao Nyang nodded and began to eat. These dishes are better than those at home. Han Chen was speechless. Of course, it was delicious. The spiritual rice was full of spiritual energy, the meat was from spiritual beasts, and the fruits were full of spiritual energy. How could it not be delicious? Ning Shu said, if you like it, you can plant some seeds when you go back. Anyway, he had set up a spirit gathering array to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy. The things he planted were also full of spiritual energy and tasted good. Okay. Yao Nyang smiled with the corners of her eyes curved, pure and beautiful. After resting for a night, Ning Shu was about to leave Yun City with Yao Nyang. There were so many people here, and they all knew her. Wherever she went, people would look and whisper to each other. Although she didn't care, she felt less comfortable. Now that Ning Shu was about to leave, Han Chen was more embarrassed. It was reasonable to say that it was time to say goodbye. Han Chen had no reason to follow Ning Shu anymore. Han Chen was very anxious. He wanted to say something, but he was afraid that the other party would think that he had ulterior motives. He wanted to hug his thigh, but he couldn't bear to call him dad. In short, he was very conflicted. Han Chen had nowhere to go now. He couldn't go back to the Taibai sect. If he went home, would he have to be an ordinary person in the future? Without anyone to guide him or teach him, it was a very difficult thing to become strong on one's own. The birth of a strong person required a lot of resources. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows and asked, are you going to leave or follow us? The earthworm said, humph, otherwise, if he follows us, he might have some unspeakable intentions towards my Yao Nyang. Han Chen thought there was no reason for him to be obsessed with his daughter. How could he possibly dare to harbor any ill intentions towards Yao Nyang? He was probably going to follow in young Lord Song's footsteps. Even Patriarch Wuyu was still trapped in the barrier. No matter how courageous he was, he didn't dare to harbor any ill intentions toward Yao Nyang. He would definitely keep his distance and not dare to offend him. Earthworm looked at Han Chen warningly. You don't want to follow us, do you? Han Chen said, I have nowhere else to go. I can't go back to the Taibai sect. I'll follow you. Ning Shu didn't have any objections. It wouldn't make much of a difference if he brought an extra person along. Besides, he would have someone to carry Yao Nyang's things as well. She couldn't possibly ask her to carry things for Yao Nyang, could she? If she were to be carried by the earthworms and turned into a meaty lump, it would surely cause a huge commotion. Therefore, Han Chen was very suitable for this position. Yao Nyang said, then big brother Han Chen should come with us. It's quite pitiful to have nowhere else to go. Thank you. Han Chen, who was pitted, shamelessly admitted that he was very pitiful. Earthworm exploded in anger. Brat, you better be careful. When the group left, they didn't cause any commotion. Before anyone noticed, the group had already left and randomly chose a direction. Traveling on a budget, they could go anywhere. After acting cool, they would run away. Along the way, Han Chen took care of the group's food, clothing, housing, and transportation. When they were in the wilderness, Han Chen did all the work. Ning Shu didn't eat, so he naturally didn't do anything. Yao Nyang was a delicate girl, so Han Chen wouldn't let her do anything. As for Earthworm, of course, he would do it, but he just didn't do it and let Han Chen do it. It could be said that he was constantly squeezing Han Chen, but Han Chen didn't seem to be unhappy. As for what he was thinking, no one knew. There was no resentment on his face. Occasionally, Yao Nyang would help with some things, but most of the time, it was Han Chen who took care of the group's food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Ning Shu brought Yao Nyang to many places. On the way, they met all kinds of people. If they met someone who needed help, they would also lend a hand. If they met bad people, as Yao Nyang said, they would directly deal with them. Along the way, they didn't even know what day it was until it started to snow. The snowy weather was very cold. Earthworm yawned all day long as if he was hibernating. Ning Shu brought the two of them and jumped through space, directly jumping back into the forest. Previously, they had already made a spatial mark. When they came back, they directly jumped through space. No matter how far the distance was, they would be back in an instant. It was very satisfying. Since they were back, they had to deal with old ancestor Wu Yu who had been locked in the space. After not paying attention to old ancestor Wu Yu for a period of time, he didn't have any vitality left. His back was hunched, and he looked like an old man with one foot in the grave. Ning Shu threw the space to Earthworm and said, "Since you like to eat, eat him." Seeing old ancestor Wu Yu's appearance, Earthworm lost all appetite. "I'm not eating. It looks like a dark cuisine. You handle it." Ning Shu thought that if he directly handled it in the surrounding area, it would probably pollute the area. So, why did he have to use such poison? If he wanted to play, he would use a higher level poison. This kind of poison would only harm the flowers and grass. It would affect the environment. It was not environmentally friendly at all. Ning Shu said to Yao Nyang, "Auntie is leaving. Cultivate well. I gave you some defensive items. If anything happens to you, I will be able to sense it." Yao Nyang nodded obediently. "I understand." Ning Shu looked at Han Chen. "Since you want to follow us, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Yao Nyang and Earthworm. Both of them are innocent fellows." Han Chen nodded. "Okay." Although he didn't know where the red-clothed demoness was going or when she would appear, he didn't dare to have any thoughts. "Since you're following us, we naturally have to reward you for taking care of Yao Nyang and Earthworm. From today onwards, you will cultivate the same secret technique as Yao Nyang. I will teach you how to cultivate." Ning Shu originally wanted Yao Nyang to teach him, but after interacting with a woman for so long, he would eventually develop feelings for her. In any case, he had plenty of secret techniques. He didn't mind spending some time teaching Han Chen. Han Chen was pleasantly surprised. His secret technique wasn't very good. After all, he was an outer disciple of the sect. How good could his secret technique be? But then, he had doubts. Could humans cultivate secret techniques of spirit beasts as well? Would they really not suffer from chi deviation? Even now, Han Chen still felt that Ning Shu was a spirit beast in human form. Chapter 3598. Ning Shu taught the ultimate martial arts to Han Chen. The more people who cultivated it, the more faith there would be in the ultimate martial arts. Although he didn't know what the ultimate martial arts were like now, it was a world of faith after all. Having faith was not a bad thing. Ning Shu told Han Chen to take care of Yao Nyang and her father. "Earthworm is just noisy. He won't do anything to you," Ning Shu said to Han Chen. If Earthworm really wanted to kill Han Chen, he would have killed Han Chen long ago. Han Chen asked boldly, "Where are you going?" "Oh, I have other things to do. I might be back after a while. I don't know the exact time." Han Chen nodded and didn't say anything else. Ning Shu set up a relatively large spirit gathering formation around the house. There was a lot of spirit energy around the house. After doing that, Ning Shu took the ball-like space and left 9 Palace Mountain. When he came out, he gave the skeleton some merit points. She had a lot of merit points now anyway. When he returned to the system space, the little mouse, who ran away from home, came back. Ning Shu said, "Oh, you're willing to come back." Little mouse snorted and ignored Ning Shu. Ning Shu took the system space to the void. After thinking for a while, he took the fire pearl. The fire pearl was very hot. If he really killed Patriarch Wuyu, the poison would spread everywhere. It was better to burn it with high temperature. Little mouse saw that Ning Shu was about to leave again and asked faintly, "Where are you going?" "Take care of yourself." "Little mouse, you really don't want to give me another world's origin?" Ning Shu, scram. Little mouse burrowed into the pillow, raised its butt, and cried pitifully. "You don't love me anymore. Ning Shu, I never fucking loved you. Love you, why didn't I know?" Little mouse was very disappointed and desperate. After confirming that Ning Shu really wouldn't give it another world's origin, it couldn't be bothered to make a fuss. In any case, he wouldn't give it to her even if she made a scene. It was tiring. Ning Shu took the fire pearl and the space to the void. Then, he stared at old ancestor Wuyu inside the space. As cultivators, their senses were extremely sensitive. Old ancestor Worryless was trembling with fear as he sensed the killing intent. It was probably time to deal with him. Senior, I have something to say." Patriarch Worryless sensed that he didn't have long to live and wanted to save his own life. Ning Shu asked, "What are you trying to say?" Ancestor Wuyu was no longer as arrogant and despotic as before. He wept bitterly as he begged for mercy, saying that he had a lot of wealth and that he had used other methods to obtain treasures that he couldn't obtain. They could all be offered to Ning Shu. Ning Shu asked casually, "What kind of treasures are there?" Forefather Worryless blabbered on and on like he was very familiar with his family's treasures. He reported all the treasures to Ning Shu in an attempt to move her. When Ning Shu heard that it wasn't some heavenly treasure or spirit tool, he really couldn't arouse any interest. He didn't need any of these things. If it was an energy body, he might be interested. No, he would definitely be tempted. But these things were useless to Ning Shu. They even took up space. When he cleaned them up, he would have to throw them away. How troublesome. "I don't really like this kind of thing," Ning Shu said lightly. Then, he directly squeezed the space. In that instant, Patriarch Worryless screamed as he was squeezed into a bloody mist. It was as if there was a strong pressure that directly crushed him into powder. At the same time, the poison contained in his body also floated out. The stench was unbearable. Ning Shu threw the fire bead into the furnace, and it disappeared under the high temperature. It didn't really pollute the environment. It was settled. There was no need to use weapons, no need to use fists. He easily solved the problem with a sword and a saber. Sure enough, the power of nature was stronger. One had to be good at using other forces. Individual strength was weak. No matter how strong an individual was, it wasn't worth mentioning in front of the power of nature. For example, in front of the power of the spatial laws, Patriarch Carefree's poison was useless. Ning Shu put away the fire pearl and casually patted the dust off his hands. He turned and saw Taishu and Ligua. Behind Ligua was a group of women. Ligua and her clansmen. The two of them are together again. Seeing Ligua's determined look, she thought that she would never see Taishu again in this life. She didn't understand the world of these people. She didn't know how long these people had been silently watching for. The place where she dealt with the corpse wasn't far from the organization. She probably took a few glances when she passed by. Taishu frowned. "Now that you have power, you want to kill the weak to gain happiness." Ning Shu said directly, "Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand what happened." She had eaten too much. Why would she kill the weak for no reason? What benefits could it give her? Was it because the void was too small, or was it because there were too many energy bodies and she didn't look for them? Oh, right, there were souls, but they had been burned. She wouldn't even eat such souls. Ning Shu looked at Ligua. He hadn't seen her for a while and felt that she had grown a lot. It wasn't her height, but her temperament had become much more stable. She no longer acted like a little girl when facing Taishu. Her face was as cold as ice. However, this was too deliberate. She deliberately pretended to be as cold as ice. It felt like she had used too much strength. Why did she have to endure it? She could jump up and point at Taishu's nose and scold him. I just don't like you. When you fall into my hands, I'll rape you. However, she had to pretend that she didn't care. She was at a disadvantage. Moreover, she wasn't resolute. They were still in contact. Could it be that they had some business dealings? She didn't know how long this group of people had been watching from the side. What were they thinking? Ning Shu wanted to ask these people if she looked cool when she dealt with the corpse. Taishu, can't you talk nicely? Girls were always talking nonsense and vulgar. Ning Shu, my words made you unhappy. The angle of looking for trouble was strange. Ning Shu greeted Ligua. Long time no see. You've become much prettier. Ligua, thank you. You've also become much more brutal. Ning Shu, it's okay. You flatter me. The female elder behind Ligua said, Patriarch, this matter is important. Now that Ligua was the patriarch, her status had improved a lot. With responsibility came pressure. No wonder Ligua had to put on airs now. It was because of her status. The patriarch of the clan was no longer a willful little girl. Ligua, let's go. Taishu looked down at Ning Shu and said, it's not easy for you to get power. You should broaden your horizons when you're strong. The brave are angry and draw their blades at the stronger. The cowardly are angry and draw their blades at the weaker. Ning Shu nodded and said, I understand. In the future, when I'm angry, I'll definitely vent on you. I won't vent on the weak. Chapter 3599. The grand uncle laughed. Stupid as a pig. Ning Shu laughed. Of course, she understood what the grand uncle meant, but she couldn't stand him looking at people with his chin up. Mama, someone is staring at me with his nostrils. Ligua said coldly, can we go now? The grand uncle turned and left. Ligua followed him with her clansmen. She looked back at Ning Shu. Are you curious about what we are going to talk about? Let's go together. Ning Shu shook her head. I'm not curious at all. It was obviously a big deal to bring so many clansmen to discuss something. This was a high-level matter. Ning Shu just wanted to be a drunk employee. Even if the sky fell, there would be someone tall to hold it up. Besides, she wouldn't die. She hoped that the grand uncle would worry until his hair fell off and become a bald judge. She was just that evil. Ligua didn't say anything. She turned and left. The two clans living next to each other couldn't be separated. What did the grand uncle ask for when he sent Ligua back last time? Energy body. Ning Shu suddenly thought of something and asked Ligua from afar, who told you that I have a death consciousness? Ligua turned back. She was as cold as ice, but she suddenly smiled like a spring breeze. Guess. Guess my ass. Naughty. Would it kill him to tell her? They were all so mysterious. Ning Shu looked at the grand uncle's back. He suspected that the grand uncle was directing and acting. That was too much. Wasn't he tired? Scheming boy. She seemed to know who was behind it. He asked a few people, but they were all like annoying little demons. They just refused to say. Ning Shu returned to the system space and asked the little mouse, is Li Wen still in that city? The little mouse snorted and ignored Ning Shu. Ning Shu said to the little mouse, "Let's go to the void to find treasures." The little mouse sneered. "No, it's boring. The human world isn't worth it. Ning Shu, I don't want to eat the world's origin anymore. Find something good and I'll give you the world's origin." The little mouse rolled its eyes. "I don't care about the world origin. I'm just too lazy to go out and look for food. If I go out to look for food, I'll definitely find something delicious." More importantly, he was unwilling to move. "Ning Shu, oh, you just want to freeload, right? Scram, I don't want a useless freeloader. Since you foundly won, follow him. Little mouse, so ruthless, so powerful. Hee hee, you're lazy, yet you blame others for being heartless. You were born to only know how to eat." Little mouse, yes, I was born to eat. Ning Shu felt that little mouse was challenging his patience. He silently looked at her, thinking that he should shut little mouse out in the future. Little mouse said angrily, okay, just a little thing and you're like a fighting cock. Vulgar, not noble. Ning Shu, you're very noble when you're asking for food. You're very elegant and refined. Little mouse was speechless. It's a bit dangerous for just the two of us to go to the void. Let's just wander around. We don't need to find energy bodies. It's not bad to find something to eat. The fruits in the void tasted pretty good and had a lot of energy. Let's go and find some snacks for ourselves. Little mouse, okay. If he didn't agree with her, he would keep talking and despising it, as if it was the most useless piece of trash in the world. He wouldn't spare any effort to attack it. Ning Shu held the rope and curled the corner of his mouth. Ding dong, the chat system rang. Ning Shu opened it and saw that it was a message from the Chongsam man. He had a pitiful expression and asked if he wanted to go to the void to look for treasures. Ning Shu, no, I want to go to the void. The Chongsam man. Bring me along. Ning Shu, the void is more dangerous. Are you sure you want to go with me? Little mouse said directly, why do you want to bring me along? We'll have to share the food with more people. What's your relationship with this guy? Why do you have to help him? Little mouse was very unhappy. It was fine to bring Ning Shu along. After all, little mouse was living under someone else's roof. But to others, little mouse wouldn't be so polite. Ning Shu, a friend. I'm bringing a friend out to see the world. As for sharing the food, he knows what he's doing. Little mouse snorted arrogantly. Ning Shu walked little mouse to the Time City. The Chongsam man was waiting for Ning Shu. He was a little speechless when he saw her walking a fist-sized silver mouse. What are you looking at? Little mouse stared at him. The Chongsam man, how do you know I'm looking at you if you don't look at me? Little mouse, fucking retard. This person is retarded. Ning Shu jumped into the void with the Chongsam man. Facing the endless and vast void, one would feel small and humble from the bottom of one's heart. The Chongsam man exclaimed in admiration. Every time I feel that the sea of law giving birth to hundreds of millions of planes is already very spectacular. It's already shocking and suffocating. And the sea of law is just a creature born in the void. How magical is it? It was indeed magical. The sea of law even gave birth to Taishu and Jingqing. Ning Shu held the rope and asked Little Mouse, where are we going? Little Mouse, choose any direction and let fate decide. Little Mouse was very Buddhist. In the past, when there was a large group, it was also like this, going with the flow. Moreover, finding things really depended on fate. Little Mouse closed its eyes and turned its body casually. When it stopped, it walked in the direction its paw pointed in. Being so careless made the Chongsam man feel very unsure. Even if it was a random direction, it should have some metaphysical explanation. For example, it would be better if it sensed this direction. Ning Shu didn't feel anything. He led Little Mouse in that direction. The Cheongsam man asked, "What are you looking for?" Ning Shu, "I don't know. I'll look for whatever there is." The Cheongsam man, when he went to the void world, at least he knew what there might be in that world. He needed something purposefully, but now he was wandering around aimlessly. He really wasn't used to it. Although Little Mouse randomly chose a direction, it still had a basic sense of danger. It would take Ning Shu to avoid the residences of the more powerful races. As it walked, it would sniff and be very vigilant. The Cheongsam man felt that this mouse was a bit like a dog, but he wouldn't say it out loud. This mouse had a bad temper. He didn't know why it was willing to wear the collar and was even walked by Ning Shu like a dog. Ning Shu stopped and asked Little Mouse, "Is this area very dangerous?" He had always been merciful. "Little Mouse, it's okay, but it's not good to invade other people's territory." No one cared about the little ant crawling on the road, but if it ran into someone's house, it would definitely be trampled to death. Ning Shu said, "Oh, it's been hard on you. Continue sniffing." Little Mouse, "Fuck, I thought I felt sorry for it." Chapter 3600. What a ruthless, cold, and exploitative woman. Little Mouse scolded Ning Shu in its heart and felt a little better. One had to learn how to deal with such a selfish woman. Otherwise, one would be angered to death by her. It was said that women were as gentle as water and were made of water. However, Little Mouse did not feel gentle at all. She was made of reinforced concrete. The more they walked, the more nervous the man in the Cheongsam became. Where were they going? Finally, he could not help but say, "Why don't we go back?" Looking at the vast void from afar, there was nothing but a black curtain. It was truly frightening. It was like facing the deep sea. Ignorant things were the most terrifying. Who knew what would suddenly appear? Ning Shu said, "Why should we go back? If there's a problem, we can run back. Don't worry." The man in the Cheongsam, "I'm afraid we won't be able to run away at all." Little Mouse stopped walking and quickly covered its nose with its paw. "Damn, it stinks." Ning Shu and the man in the Cheongsam sniffed. "It doesn't smell." Little Mouse looked at the two of them as if they were crazy. "It's so ugly and you can't even smell it. Is your nose an ornament?" Ning Shu looked at Little Mouse indifferently. Little Mouse immediately shut up. Ning Shu asked, "What's that smell? Is it the smell of Senior Uncle?" "Probably, but it's too strong." Little Mouse refused to go and wanted to turn in another direction. Ning Shu suddenly asked, "Is Senior Uncle dying?" Little Mouse said casually, "Maybe. Anyway, he's not in a good condition. There's a rotten smell on his body. He was like an old man with one foot in the grave. There was a smell of bad luck and death on his body." Little Mouse, the cleaner in the void, ate everything. Of course, it could distinguish between good and bad ingredients. Ning Shu said, "Oh. It seems that the sea of law is really going to collapse. Turn in another direction. I feel like I'm going to suffocate." Little Mouse was about to cry from the smell. "Why are we leaving? Let's go and watch the show." The Grand Elder was definitely here. He didn't know what he was discussing with the pear fruit race. "I'm not going. It stinks." Little Mouse was very resistant. Ning Shu dragged the Little Mouse. The Little Mouse sat back and observed the expression of the Little Mouse. Little Mouse's expression was relaxed when he faced one direction, but when Ning Shu changed directions, Little Mouse's expression was one of relief. The Little Mouse's face was scrunched up into a ball. He quickly covered his face, making him look extremely ugly. "Very good, this is the direction." Ning Shu dragged the Little Mouse in this direction. The Little Mouse was very resistant. Why did he have to go to such a smelly place? The Cheongsam man asked, "Where are we going?" And, to see the place where the plane was born, the land of miracles. The smell was so strong that the Sea of Law was probably not far away. After all this time, the little mouse was leading them in circles. They went around and around until they reached the vicinity of the Sea of Law. To be honest, Ning Shu didn't have a full look at what the Sea of Law looked like. He only glanced at it before, and it was in this mountain. He didn't know what the Sea of Law looked like. The Cheongsam man asked, "Is this okay?" He always felt that the Sea of Law was like a forbidden area. Could they really go there as they pleased? The little mouse was so smelly that his tears fell. His face was filled with despair. Ning Shu moved his nose, but he didn't smell anything. Yes, it smells like a corpse that has been fermented for 49 days. Don't even mention how overwhelming it is. Alright, the little mouse's sense of smell was really sharp. Only the little mouse could smell the special smell. Ning Shu carried the little mouse inhumanely towards the Sea of Law. The little mouse cried out and directly vomited. He vomited right into Ning Shu's arms. Ning Shu didn't even think about it. He picked up the little mouse and threw him away. What a useless thing. The little mouse ran and returned to the system space. The Cheongsam man saw how exaggerated the little mouse was and suspected that he couldn't smell anything. Although Ning Shu knew beforehand that the situation of the Sea of Law wasn't good, when he really saw it, he was so shocked that his soul almost flew away. This was the Sea of Law. It was like a dead sea. It was pitch black without any signs of life. There was only endless silence. It was like dry mud. The Black Sea of Law's water was very viscous. At first glance, it made people feel uncomfortable and sad. The Sea of Law became like this. And the Sea of Law became smaller and was drying up. Beside the Sea of Law, Taishu and Li Guo were indeed here. Ning Shu carefully went over. The Cheongsam man whispered, "Let's go." The Cheongsam man didn't know why, but his heart was extremely depressed. He was so depressed that he wanted to cry. He just wanted to escape from this strange and uncomfortable atmosphere. "I can't take it anymore. It's too uncomfortable." The Cheongsam man lowered his heart. "It's very uncomfortable." Ning Shu roughly understood that it was probably empathy. The Sea of Law gave birth to a plane, and the plane gave birth to life. The Sea of Law was the source of life. Seeing the source of life become like this, it was impossible to be indifferent. Especially since the Cheongsam man's strength wasn't that strong, he was more easily affected. Ning Shu shushed him. "Wait for me here. I'll go over and listen." Since he was already here, if he left just like that, his heart would be scratching his lungs. The Cheongsam man's tears were about to fall. He no longer had a heart, but his heart was still throbbing with pain. He wiped his tears. "Go ahead. I'll wait for you here." Ning Shu hummed in agreement and lifted the hem of her dress to move over. Those people might have already noticed her, but they ignored her. Ning Shu couldn't get too close. She raised her ears to listen to them from a distance. But she could only see their lips moving. She couldn't hear what they were saying. They probably blocked the sound. Ning Shu sighed. The laws had already become like this. Logically speaking, Zheng Qin was already dead. The situation in the Sea of Law should have improved a little. But from the looks of it, the situation in the Sea of Law would only worsen and not improve. Based on his deductions, it was possible that Zheng Qin was still alive. Did Granduncle's heart soften? Ning Shu couldn't help but scan her body. She felt that Zheng Qin was in some corner of her body. She was incubating Zheng Qin. She felt a chill just thinking about it. It was really annoying. Why was Zheng Qin so tirelessly entangling with her? Ning Shu knew what was going on. After thinking about it, she felt that Zheng Qin was in her body. As for where she was, she didn't know. Where was she hiding? Even if she wasn't in her body, Chengqing should still be alive. A centipede dies but doesn't fall down. A scourge lasts for 1,000 years. Ning Shu observed Granduncle and Li Guo's people. It was obvious that they were discussing the Sea of Law. Granduncle's expression was cold. When he spoke, he would occasionally frown. Chapter 3601. Hearing Li Guo's words, Granduncle nodded slightly. Then, Li Guo spoke to her own people. Then, Li Guo's people walked in the air above the Sea of Law. They walked to the center of the Sea of Law and sat cross-legged in the air. They closed their eyes and meditated. Not long after, Li Guo and her people emitted a faint fluorescent light. This light flew out from their bodies and condensed together. This light was gentle and cold, with a fresh aura, as if it could blow away the rotten smell of the Sea of Law. Waves of fluorescent light gathered together and then slowly gathered in the Sea of Law. Although he did not know what it was doing, it seemed to be beneficial to the Sea of Law. He suddenly felt that Li Guo was quite generous. Although she was cheated by Granduncle, she was still willing to save the Sea of Law. But it was also possible that Granduncle was blackmailing her. And, the more he thought about it, the more likely it was. Granduncle looked in the direction of Ning Shu. Ning Shu knew that she had been discovered, so she walked out confidently and walked to Ning Shu's side. She looked at Li Guo and asked, "What are they doing?" "Granduncle, purifying the Sea of Law." Ning Shu was surprised, they have such an ability. In her impression, Li Guo was a raging loli. Once she lost her mind, she would be a fighting machine. She did not expect that when she was still rational, she would have such an ability. Purification, it was as if the light of Mother Mary enveloped Li Guo. Granduncle said indifferently, "When rational, there is no fighting strength, but it does not mean that there is no other ability." Ning Shu asked, "Is the situation in the Sea of Law very serious?" Granduncle did not speak. Was he blind? Couldn't see. Ning Shu changed the topic, "Didn't Chengqing die? Why is the Sea of Law still like this?" She wanted to get a little bit of information from Granduncle's mouth. Then, she would be able to get the answer she wanted. Granduncle still did not speak, looking at Li Guo in the center of the Sea of Law. Ning Shu asked again, "You offered yourself to Li Guo for help?" Granduncle glared at her, "Shut up." Ning Shu continued, "There is a rotten smell on your body. You are going to die." Granduncle's expression did not change, he was very indifferent. Ning Shu's nose twitched, but he still couldn't smell the scent of the Granduncle. It seemed that she couldn't smell it. "Don't put your dog nose on me." The Grand Elder looked at her coldly. Ning Shu asked, "How long will they need to purify it?" "After purifying it, will the situation in the Sea of Law become much better?" Aging was aging, and it was irreversible. The purification could only delay the time of death. Why did the Sea of Law become so black? Who's the one who's responsible for the pollution? Is it because of the worm's corpse? Why did you throw the insect's body in here? Don't you have energy bodies? Putting energy bodies in here is better than putting corpses. I can't feel any life force, the Sea of Law should already be dead. Sigh, I feel so bad. I feel like my mother is about to die. Will the purification be like an enema, getting rid of the filthy things in the Sea of Law? The Sea of Laws is just constipation, right? The color is too dark, right? Does the Sea of Law not have the ability to purify itself? It's probably beyond the range of self-purification and requires the intervention of external forces. The Grand Elder turned his head to look at Ning Shu, "Shut up." Ning Shu sighed, "Even if I shut up, these problems will still exist. I can't deceive myself. Even if you don't listen, these problems won't disappear." The Grand Elder said, "Get lost if you keep arguing." Ning Shu said, "I am actively looking for a solution." "What method do you have to solve the problem of the Sea of Law?" The Grand Elder said, give birth to a new sea of law. But two won't be born at the same time. Ning Shu's eyes turned, you mean, when this sea of law dries up, a new one will be born? It was like a fruit. When it matured and rotted, the tree would bear new fruit. And the sea of law was like this ripe fruit that was about to rot. It was actually against nature to leave him hanging like this. If the old didn't go, the new wouldn't come. And the Grand Elder thought that creating a sea of law was very unrealistic. It was probably like humans wanting to create a kiwi. How could they do it? Maybe they could synthesize the nutrients of the peach, but it would probably make the taste of the fruit flesh. Once the fruit fell, everything would vanish into thin air. Billions upon billions of planes. Also, Ning Shu glanced at the Grand Elder. Would he die? Anyway, the Grand Elder gave Ning Shu the feeling that he was unfathomable. This kind of person seemed to be unable to die. Ning Shu still wanted to say something, but the Grand Elder said directly, shut up. Ning Shu said, how long will it take to purify it? Compared to the huge sea of law, Li Guo and her clansmen were like the bright moon and fireflies. It was estimated that the purification could only purify a part of it. It would take a lot of time. Ning Shu sat down and looked at Li Guo and the others purifying the sea of law. He asked, why is Li Guo willing to help you purify the sea of law? According to the normal situation, Li Guo had been treated coldly by the Grand Elder, threatened and extorted. When the Grand Elder asked Li Guo to help, Li Guo should have pointed at the door and said, get lost. The relationship had become like this, but the Grand Elder could still find Li Guo's clansmen to purify the sea of law. He was capable. The Grand Elder said, if you are very free, go deal with the star stones, do missions, or be the person in charge of Area D. The black-hearted boss couldn't bear to see his employees take a break. Ning Shu patted the seat next to him and said to the Grand Elder, sit down and rest. Aren't you tired of being tense every day? I'm very strong all day. Aren't I tired of being high and mighty? The Grand Elder stepped on Ning Shu's skirt and used her skirt to wipe the stone. He kicked her skirt away and then sat down with his windbreaker. Ning Shu said, fuck. Ning Shu dragged the hem of her dress back and brushed the dust off it. Her skirt had turned into a feather duster. This was the first time she realized that a long skirt was not good. Some bitches used her skirt as a rag. She felt that it was good that the Grand Elder played with the sea of law. He was too annoying. Ning Shu held her chin and asked tirelessly with excitement, will you die? The Grand Elder snorted with a thick nasal sound as if he was vibrating from his chest. I won't die even if you die. I've disappointed you. Ning Shu sighed. I'm really disappointed. Ning Shu stared at the Grand Elder. Can you honestly tell me one thing? Is the Jingqin on me? The Grand Elder said, you're thinking too much. Are you paranoid? Ning Shu hoped that she was thinking too much, but she believed in her feelings. Thinking about it, even if Jingqin was really with her, Grand Uncle wouldn't tell her. Ning Shu felt that if the Grand Elder left the Jingqin on her, it was actually to let the Jingqin go and give the Jingqin a chance to survive. Chapter 3602. Ning Shu didn't expect to get any information from the Grand Uncle. Even if it was true, the Grand Uncle would say no. Who would care about the feelings of an incubator? She was the incubator of the official, but she didn't know when the official would break out of the shell. Maybe even she, the incubator, would become the nutrition of the official. These two brothers are really annoying. What do I owe them? Ning Shu's heart was filled with curses. Since he couldn't ask, Ning Shu was too lazy to ask. He changed the topic and asked, do Li Guo and the others know that you're going to die? I think you should leave a descendant before you die. Since he was going to die anyway, he shouldn't waste it. At least he could pass on his genes and abilities. It could also increase the strength of Li Guo and the others. However, according to the Grand Uncle's character, he probably wouldn't do that. I'm noble and cold. I'm the best in the world. The grand uncle frowned. Can you only store such superficial things in your head? Ning Shu nodded. Of course, I can only store superficial things. I can't store anything too profound. The Cheongsam man waited for Ning Shu in the distance, but he couldn't wait. When he got closer and saw the two of them sitting side by side, he couldn't go over. He could only wander in the distance. He didn't want to get close to the judge for no reason. Besides, he would feel a little awkward if he went over. The two of them were sitting together. He would ruin the scene if he went over. Ning Shu turned around and saw the Cheongsam man. He said, "You go first. We won't look for anything this time. We'll look for treasures next time." The Cheongsam man glanced at the judge and nodded. "I'll go then. Call me next time." The Cheongsam man left in a flash and returned to the system space. Although the judge didn't look at him from beginning to end, the Cheongsam man still felt a lot of pressure. Ning Shu was still sitting next to him. He was really not afraid of death. Although he didn't do anything wrong, he still felt guilty. As soon as he saw the judge, the bad memories in the Cheongsam man's memory surfaced. The blurry face slowly became clear again. The pair of eyes that were as deep as the sea looked at him quietly. It was filled with ease and relief, as well as unwavering affection. The Cheongsam man was in a bad mood. He went to a restaurant and ordered a pot of wine to drink slowly. Ning Shu looked at the purified pear fruit in the middle of the sea of law. The fluorescence from her entire body made her look extremely holy. Grand Uncle was truly courageous, daring to allow the Liguo race to come to the Sea of Law. If anything happened to the Sea of Laws, then the trillions of planes would directly collapse. Ning Shu felt that the Sea of Laws was already incapable of giving birth to a new plane. In fact, it was also a slow death. No new planes were born, and existing planes would be destroyed for various reasons. Just like that, it dragged on. A terminally ill old man was being kept alive by all kinds of methods. He was going to die sooner or later. Death wasn't scary, but he was afraid of living a life worse than death. If the Sea of Law was a person, it would definitely be in incomparable pain right now. Ning Shu asked, "Why don't you let the Sea of Laws die naturally?" Could it be that if the Sea of Laws collapsed, Grand Uncle and Jingqing would die? Based on Jingqing's words, that seemed to be the case. If the mother died, then the living planes that were attached to the mother would collapse as well, wouldn't they? Was the Grand Uncle trying to keep him alive? Grand Uncle, shut up. Ning Shu rolled his eyes and pursed his lips. He knew that he wanted him to shut up, but he still poked his sore spot, causing him to fly into a rage out of humiliation. Ayaya, I just won't die. Aren't you envious and jealous? La la la, Ning Shu's little man in his heart laughed complacently with his hands on his hips, his face showing compassion for the state of the universe. In any case, we know each other. I will help you find a good place with good feng shui. Grand Uncle looked at Ning Shu indifferently. Don't treat your own imagination as the truth. Ning Shu nodded, I understand. For someone who was about to die, he had to be more humane. Grand Uncle, what the hell do you know? The Liguo race purified for quite some time, and the fluorescence on their bodies gradually disappeared. Then, they stood up and ended the purification. Ning Shu looked at the Sea of Laws. It was already purified. Why did she see that the Sea of Laws didn't change at all? There wasn't even a single ripple. The Sea of Laws was still the same. It was probably because the problem was too serious. Ligua's face was tired, and it was obvious that she had consumed a lot of energy. She said coldly to Grand Uncle, I need to rest for a while. It's too serious. It can't be purified in a short time. Grand Uncle stood up, okay. If you feel that it's too much, I can call your race over to help. It will be faster. No need. Li Guo's voice was sharp as she refused. Ning Shu, she wanted to pull her race over to purify. Grand-uncle was really pushing his luck. Li Guo was so angry that her face was distorted. Her noble and cold demeanor immediately collapsed. Li Guo sat down to rest, and Ning Shu asked her, "Why are you willing to help?" Li Guo's face was cold. "You think I want to come? Didn't you see that he threatened me?" Ning Shu asked curiously, "How did he threaten you?" Li Guo lifted her eyelids and looked at Ning Shu. "Why should I tell you? If you join my race, I will tell you." Ning Shu straightened her back. "No need, I'm not very curious." Seeing how angry Li Guo was, she must have been threatened. Being weak was so sullen. She was extorted of her energy body, and she was pulled over to be purified. It made one's hair stand on end. However, she had cheated Li Guo before, and Li Guo was still able to invite her half-truthfully. She was quite magnanimous. Li Guo cherished her so much. Oh my, why did she feel that Li Guo was scheming against her? For her own race, Li Guo was quite willing to go all out. From Li Guo and grand-uncle, Ning Shu had a preliminary impression of the living beings in the void. Actually, there was no difference. They were all struggling for survival. Ning Shu asked, "Can the Sea of Law be purified?" The problem with the Sea of Law was really not ordinary. If purification could solve the problem, the Sea of Law would not have become like this. Decline was inevitable. Li Guo said, "It can delay for a while." Li Guo said unhappily, "I'm so tired and annoyed. Grand-uncle is really annoying." Ning Shu felt the same and asked, "Did you succeed?" Li Guo nodded, "I succeeded." Really? Ning Shu was surprised and looked at Li Guo's stomach. "Are you pregnant?" It seemed that grand-uncle was really going to die and decided to leave a child for himself. Li Guo was speechless. Li Guo could not be bothered with Ning Shu. Ning Shu gave grand-uncle a thumbs up. "Congratulations, congratulations." Grand-uncle frowned. What was wrong with him? His brain was not fully developed. He was simply retarded. Li Guo also wanted to cover her face and covered Ning Shu's mouth. "Stop talking." Ning Shu turned to look at her. "Fake." Li Guo was speechless. Ning Shu was speechless. Li Guo still had feelings for grand-uncle. She did not succeed, but she said that she succeeded. Chapter 3603. What kind of mentality was this? Scamming? She insisted on doing that with the grand-uncle. Ning Shu said, "Really useless." Li Guo said, "Stay away from me." Ning Shu changed the topic. "How long do you need to purify it?" Li Guo was also afraid that Ning Shu would talk about borrowing seeds, so she answered Ning Shu's question, "It will take some time." "It won't be short." "I don't know how long it will take." "I see." Then she had to leave. She couldn't stay here and watch Li Guo purify the Sea of Law. It was better to look for treasures, do missions, or deal with the star stones. She couldn't make the situation in the Sea of Law better even if she stayed here. Ning Shu said, "Then you can do it." "I'm leaving." Ning Shu looked at the grand-uncle with pity, as well as the superiority of an immortal to someone who was about to die. The veins on the grand-uncle's forehead jumped. Fucking retard. Ning Shu left and returned to the system space. The little mouse lay on the sofa, feeling very uncomfortable. Ning Shu said, "Okay, let's go look for treasures." The little mouse looked at Ning Shu in horror. "Are you the devil?" It was already like this, but he still wanted it to go look for the void. The void was so dangerous, it had to go all out. How could it go to the void in its current state? Did he have to squeeze it like this? It was very uncomfortable now. The little mouse's mouth was bulging, and the whiskers on both sides of its cheeks were trembling. Its eyes were crystal clear, and tears were about to come out. It felt very wronged. Ning Shu said. Why are you crying? Is it that smelly? You're crying. Ning Shu was very surprised. He grabbed the little mouse's neck, lifted it in front of him, and wiped the little mouse's face with his hand. Why are you so delicate? Delicate your sister. After being coaxed, little mouse felt even more wronged. Previously, he couldn't hold back his tears, but now, he was really crying drop by drop. Her tears dripped onto Ning Shu's hand. Ning Shu threw it onto the sofa in disgust. Alright, stop crying. Even girls don't cry as much as you do. Hee hee, only girls can cry. Ning Shu looked at the little mouse. Alright, I won't look for treasures. If you want to vomit, don't vomit on the ground. You're still the king of a tribe. It was a little embarrassing. Little mouse, you don't allow people to be weak. Sure. He couldn't afford to offend him. Since the little mouse's condition was not good, Ning Shu would not force it to go. Now that the little mouse was in such a bad mood and the void was so dangerous, it would be too easy for the little mouse to cause trouble. Since the little mouse was in such a state, Ning Shu felt that he was still a gentle person and should show some concern. Sigh, people with immortality were so gentle. Little mouse lay on the sofa, sprawled out on all fours. Seeing that Ning Shu was indifferent, it couldn't help but say, I'm already in such a state. Why aren't you comforting me? Ning Shu. How do you want me to comfort you? Little mouse felt that Ning Shu was really unreasonable. Comfort me with some material things. Ning Shu made an "oh" sound and had a look of realization. Then, he asked, what material things? Little mouse gave him a look of disdain. Like the origin of the world. Ning Shu, I can give you spiritual comfort. Using material things is too vulgar and insulting. I know you're not such a little mouse. Little mouse. Please insult me as much as you want. No, I understand. Little mouse instantly rolled its eyes. Stingy, she didn't want to give him the origin of the world. Why was it so difficult to get something from her? Stingy. Ning Shu clicked on the system's exchange store, intending to exchange for fasting pills and go to do tasks. Doing tasks was the right path in the world. When she had more souls in the world of reincarnation, and Zhu Jun collected more soul fluid, she might not need to do tasks anymore. Her current soul wasn't very good at doing things. Ning Shu said to Dan Qing, go and do tasks. Dan Qing agreed, then hesitated to speak. Clearly, there was something that was hard for him to say. That, Ning Shu. Just say it, Ning Shu said. I can't say. Dan Qing sighed. Ning Shu, then don't say it. Dan Qing, I want to say it. Ning Shu, then say it. Dan Qing, then I'll say it. Ning Shu took a deep breath. Say it. Couldn't she be more straightforward? Dan Qing said, don't you have a lot of titles and blessings given by the people who entrusted you? Ning Shu nodded. Well, yes. It seemed that there were a lot. She had never cared so much about these things, and they seemed to be useless. Dan Qing hesitated and said, can you give these titles to me? Ning Shu asked calmly, what's in it for you? Dan Qing said, these titles will bring a certain amount of luck and faith to the task taker, but it's not suitable for the task taker to enter the world with luck. But it's better for the system. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. Is that so? Dan Qing said, yes, you can ask other task takers. Usually, these titles are given to the system by default, but you can also choose not to give them. There was such an unspoken rule. Why didn't the previous Xingqin ask her for it? It was probably because he didn't care about such little things. He looked down on a little bit of luck given by an ant, even invisible luck. In the previous years, Ning Shu felt that his life and work were abnormal. It was mainly because he encountered an abnormal system. Dan Qing said, the system has been deprived of its memory and can't remember the past. Compared to the task taker, the system sacrifices more and gains less. It will make up for the system in other aspects. I can't say for sure before. Ning Shu said, I see. Since these things weren't very helpful to him, Ning Shu wouldn't be stingy if they were helpful to the system. She opened the status panel. From doing missions until now, she had accumulated a lot of auras. Mother of the World, Queen's Blessing, Model Worker, Chen Shi's Blessing, Leader Aura, Grass's Blessing, Best Friend for Life, Miao Miao Miao's Blessing, Life-Saving Hand, Zhu Su's Blessing, Founding Woman, Chen Ermiai's Blessing, Beauty-in-Law, Chen Ning's Blessing, Bane of the Blood Clan, Jasmine's Blessing, Cross-Race Communication, Bai Sanyang's Blessing, Brave Heart, Wang Ying's Blessing, Bloodthirsty Tyrant, Ni Bingyan's Blessing, Heart of Peace and Joy, Luck Aura, Faith Aura. Longevity. She had 15 auras. But after careful calculation, it wasn't that much. After all, she had done a lot of missions. Ning Shu suddenly felt that she wasn't a very qualified task taker. She thought too much. She thought she had a lot of auras. How embarrassing. Ning Shu asked Dan Qing, what aura do you want? For the immortal Ning Shu, these auras were of little help to her. It was useless to leave them here. She might as well give them to the system/BK. Chapter 3604. Ning Shu wanted to ask the man in the Cheongsam if that was the case, but after some thought, it did not matter. On the phone, these things were nothing to her. If Dan Qing really played tricks and deceived her, she would not be able to do anything. He would be the one suffering, but it would not be him. Moreover, Dan Qing did not need to lie. This thing could help him, but it was probably not that much. Dan Qing was the one who lied against his heart for such a small thing and ended up being tortured. Ning Shu asked Dan Qing, what halo do you want? Dan Qing said, pardon me for asking, but can I only choose one? Ning Shu. How many do you want? Dan Qing said, then give me the Mother of the World halo. After all, it's the Empress halo, so my luck is slightly better. Ning Shu said, actually, the Founding Female General halo is not bad. After all, it was sculpted into a statue. It would probably leave a few words in the history books. That would be quite good. And because of the statue, it would continue to be passed down. Among these halos, the Founding Female General's luck was probably the strongest. Although he did not know if that plane existed now, the luck contained in this halo was the strongest. Dan Qing said, okay then, I want the Founding Female General halo. Ning Shu said, take it yourself. Ning Shu asked, what does your system need luck for? Oh, actually, the system needs to be strong too. When it reaches a certain level, it can break away from the system's identity. Ning Shu touched his chin and thought, that's not right. It's a bit contradictory. Normal mission enforcers and the system are bound to their souls, so how can the system break away from the system's identity? They were bound together, so how could they be separated? The system said, they can be partners, but it didn't say that they have to be bound together. If you want to break away, it's actually possible. Go through another soul cleansing. Dan Qing said. Ning Shu asked, what soul cleansing? Cleansing the soul. That was so simple and violent. Dan Qing said, it's to cleanse the soul again and wipe away the memories. Ning Shu was speechless. It was true. He felt that this organization was much stricter with the system than the mission enforcers. He did not know why. Ning Shu said, then do you want to leave? If you want to leave, I can help you. Ning Shu smiled. To be honest, she was still willing to use an AI system. If Dan Qing wanted to leave her, Ning Shu could help. Dan Qing refused and said, there's no need. I'm not strong enough to break free. If I really break free, I won't be able to do anything. Escaping is a goal, but we have to take it one step at a time. If he really couldn't even make a system, then he would have no place to use his skills, and he might really have to go to the Lost City to serve as a waiter. That way, he wouldn't even have the chance to become strong. Ning Shu didn't stand in front of him and let him take one of the halos. He didn't give him all the halos. Although these halos were useless to her, Ning Shu didn't want to give them all to Dan Qing. He didn't want Dan Qing to think that these things were easy to obtain. There were a lot of cases where one would be grateful for one's gain but hated for another's gain. It would be a terrible thing if one's appetite was not satisfied. Dan Qing took one of the halos and thanked Ning Shu. There was no resentment in his tone. In principle, these things should be given to the system, but it wasn't mandatory. Giving them was a favor, not giving them was a duty. Dan Qing was well aware of this point in his heart. Ning Shu was about to do the mission when the chat system rang. The person who sent the message was someone Ning Shu didn't know. Ning Shu didn't intend to pay attention. Seeing that Ning Shu didn't reply, the person immediately revealed his identity. He was from District D and said that there was no one there to deal with the Star Stone, so he asked Ning Shu to help deal with it. His tone was pitiful. Ning Shu, what was this? Could she pretend not to be here and pretend not to see it? Ning Shu thought about it and contacted Ah Wan, asking if she had time. Ning Shu felt that he should find a person to be in charge of District D. It would be best if this person had a good relationship with him, although his relationship with Ah Wan was as light as water. But in order to prevent the people in District D from relying on him, Ning Shu felt that it was necessary to let Ah Wan learn how to deal with the Star Stone. And as the person in charge, there would be a certain amount of resources. He just didn't know if Ah Wan wanted these resources. Ning Shu didn't want to be the person in charge, but he also needed to develop some connections. Ah Wan, I'm fine. I have time. Ning Shu told Ah Wan the ins and outs of the matter, including the situation in District D. Ah Wan was very surprised. Why me? Ning Shu, because your current conditions are suitable. The Cheongsam man didn't understand the rules. He had told him a few times, but it seemed that the Cheongsam boy was still entangled with the space law. Well, she wasn't entangled with the time law because she didn't understand it at all. Alright, thank you very much. Very good, Ah Wan agreed. Ning Shu met with Ah Wan first before heading to District D. Ning Shu saw that Ah Wan's soul was still very weak. Although it wasn't as strong as the transparent layer's ghost, it wasn't strong. When they arrived at District D, the group of people were really teary-eyed. They looked like they were waiting to be saved. Ning Shu was speechless. Ah Wan had always been active in District A. Those big shots were all cold. It was the first time he saw such enthusiastic people. Ning Shu started to deal with the Star Stone and said to Ah Wan, your soul isn't strong now. And dealing with the Star Stone is harmful to your soul, so I'll do it this time. You can watch from the side. Ning Shu dealt with it while telling Ah Wan the trick. Ning Shu felt that he was really a gentle teacher. When he was taught by Tai Shu back then, he was very rough. Ah Wan listened carefully and looked around. Why do I feel that District D is so poor, right? Ning Shu continued, this district lacks a person in charge. Without a person in charge, even the slightest bit of resources are divided by the other people in charge. As a result, this district is getting poorer and poorer. It's a vicious cycle. There's competition between the districts. In short, District D is miserable. I see. Ah Wan nodded. I'm from District A. Can I take over District D? Why not? They urgently need a person in charge now. If someone comes to take over, these people will definitely celebrate. Ah Wan let go of her worries. If this was the case, there wouldn't be any internal conflicts when she took over District D in the future. Less trouble was better. Ah Wan asked, has there been no one in District D who can deal with the Star Stone for such a long time? Probably, but it's always people sent by the organization. There's no one to teach, so there's always a shortage of young people. One took the tools and slowly processed it. Just like how Ning Shu learned to deal with the Star Stone, the speed was very slow. She couldn't process one piece for a long time. It was very strenuous/BK. Chapter 3605. Ning Shu didn't urge her. Processing star stones was a job that hurt the soul, and if she was anxious, the damage to the soul would be even greater. In the future, when you are free, let's go together when I process star stones, Ning Shu said to Wan. When Wan learned it, she would be completely free and could be a hands-off shopkeeper. Thinking about it, it was really beautiful. Wan asked Ning Shu, they obviously want you to be in charge, why are you unwilling? Ning Shu, because of freedom. She had lived for too long, and carrying a responsibility forever was a very scary thing. For example, that bastard grand-uncle. Such a huge void was waiting for her to explore, the treasures of the void were waiting for her to obtain. Wan. Very impressive, you won't be tempted by temporary benefits. Being in charge, whether it was benefits or status, was a temptation. Ning Shu, that's not it, it was that she could live for too long. So long that she didn't need to care about temporary benefits. Ning Shu was processing star stones while looking at Wan. The other big shots were processing star stones, occasionally looking at Ning Shu and Wan. Two beauties working together was really pleasing to the eye. Humans had to care and be more tolerant of beautiful things. Ning Shu finished processing all the star stones, but Wan didn't process a single one. Instead, she was so tired that she was panting, and her soul had also dimmed. Ning Shu said, don't be anxious, take it slow. To be honest, Ning Shu didn't know how long the Sea of Law could last. Maybe not long after, these planes would no longer exist. But according to His Excellency and the others, a few million years was a simple matter. But Ning Shu really couldn't feel the vitality of the Sea of Law. Could it really last for a few million years? Ning Shu was suspicious of this time. But for the day that the planes existed, they had people who had to do the things at hand well. If the Sea of Law no longer existed, their group, even if they didn't die and didn't need to rely on the planes to live, they would become useless existences. They weren't strong, but compared to the living beings of the void, they were too weak. They felt a little homeless. Wan looked at Ning Shu in a daze and asked, what are you thinking about? Ning Shu said, the Sea of Stars. She was thinking that she had to go to the void lands to look for energy bodies that could allow her Sea of Laws to persevere for a period of time, at least until she became stronger. How annoying. The Sea of Law had now become her responsibility. Ning Shu had to admit that if he wanted to live freely, the Sea of Laws had to exist, at least it could not collapse so quickly. Ning Shu's expression became heavy all of a sudden, making Wan somewhat speechless. After dealing with the star rocks in one place, they went to the next. Ning Shu then remembered and asked Wan, do you know how to build a spatial passage? Wan nodded. Sure. That's right, it seems like I can pick up the fragments after building a spatial tunnel. This was a necessary condition. She could pick up the fragments first before slowly comprehending the spatial laws. Alright then, don't teach Wan about the laws of space, teach her how to construct a spatial tunnel. Ning Shu dealt with the star rocks and still had to teach Wan. Wan's soul was not strong and was easily tired, so she did not deal with it and kept taking notes. After dealing with all the broken planes, Ning Shu and Wan were about to leave, but they were warmly urged to stay by the others. If not for the fact that they were girls, they would have shaken hands and hugged them. Wan was speechless. Suddenly, she did not really want to be the person in charge of this group of people. Ning Shu walked away with Ah Wan very coldly and said to Ah Wan, "It's a bit difficult for your soul to deal with the star rocks." They were truly in the same boat. Ah Wan said, "I'm currently doing missions, I hope to quickly replenish my soul." Ah Wan felt that she was going to die from being busy. She had to do missions, pick up fragments, learn how to deal with the star rocks, and become the person in charge in the future. She felt that there was not enough time. Ning Shu returned to the system space, picked up the little mouse and said, "Let's go to the Void Lands for a stroll." Previously, he said that he wanted to go, but in the end, he was attracted by the Sea of Laws and came back, planning to do missions. After thinking about it, he still felt that he should go to the Void Lands to look for the energy body. Ning Shu thought about it carefully. It seemed that the energy body was useless to her, but because it was precious, she wanted to have it. Right, it seemed that peerless martial arts also needed energy bodies. Now that the Sea of Laws was in such a dead state, whether it was for public or private reasons, she had to go look for it. The little mouse could be considered a good thing, at least the probability of finding the energy body was higher. After all, it was looking for food, so it definitely had talent in this area. The little mouse tilted its head, "I'm not going." Ning Shu took out a world's origin and tempted it, "I'll give you a world's origin." This time, the mouse touched its stomach, "I don't want to eat right now, I don't want anything at all." Yo, it's even twisted now. Ning Shu tossed the world's origin, and the little mouse's eyes moved along with the energy body. Its eyeballs were about to fall onto the world's origin, but it was still holding on. Ning Shu asked, "Are you going or not?" Every time she said she would go to the Void Lands, she actually didn't gain anything, the little mouse only brought her to finally one. She waited for a piece of energy body, but this kind of energy body was very sharp, it wasn't an energy body full of vitality. Ning Shu looked at the deity beating whip and the energy body, the two were fighting a battle of wits and courage. The energy body bounced the deity beating whip away again and again, but the deity beating whip kept wrapping around it tirelessly. Not sure if it was Ning Shu's misconception, but she felt that the energy body was a little smaller, it was probably absorbed. Ning Shu felt that when the deity beating whip absorbed this energy body, there would definitely be a qualitative change. Maybe a little lowly would be born. Ning Shu said, "If you're not willing, then forget it, I'm going to do the mission." As she spoke, she put away the world's origin. The little mouse jumped up, "Since you're begging me, then I'll reluctantly agree to you. Look at your pitiful appearance, if I don't agree, I'll be heartless." Ning Shu, "As long as you're happy," the little mouse stretched out its hand, "give me the world's origin." Ning Shu rolled her eyes and threw the world's origin to the little mouse. The little mouse immediately caught it and began to eat it. After eating it, it wiped its mouth and said, "I'm a little sleepy now, let's talk after I sleep." Ning Shu chuckled, revealing a sinister smile, and grabbed it by the neck, "After eating my food, you still want to go back on your words, you'll die a horrible death." The little mouse, a woman who haggles over every ounce. Ning Shu led the little mouse into the void and said, "Let's pass by the Sea of Law and take a look." The little mouse's fur all stood up, "Why are we going to such a disgusting place?" Ning Shu gently stroked the little mouse, "There's no other way, seeing such a disgusting place will motivate me to look for the energy body /BK. Chapter 3607. The little mouse adjusted the collar on its neck. Damn, this is so annoying. At first, the man and mouse held their heads high, but after walking for a short distance, they hunched their backs and carefully lowered their presence like thieves. The void was too dangerous. There were black holes in the void. If they were not careful and got sucked into a black hole, they would be crushed and never be able to get out. Furthermore, they might be sucked into an unknown space crack. There were all kinds of dangers that were unimaginable. Ning Shu felt that it was understandable for him to be scared, but why was the little mouse so scared? Ning Shu asked softly, "Hey, don't you often wander around the void? Why are you like this?" The little mouse said, I'm alone now. No one is leading the way for me. If there's any danger, it's always my subordinates. All right. Ning Shu sensed the sensors that he had released earlier and frowned. In just a short while, 3 of them had been damaged and could not be sensed anymore. All right, these man-made things were a little fragile in the void. At this moment, Ning Shu did not have much hope for these sensors. It was normal that they did not find anything, but it would be a pleasant surprise if they did. It seemed that fate was really following the little mouse. Ning Shu asked, You've been drifting in the void for so long. Where do you think is the most likely place to have energy bodies? The little mouse said without thinking, I don't know. These things were discovered completely by luck. Can you people find gold mines buried deep underground without any tools? If I knew where energy bodies were born, I wouldn't be hungry. The little mouse moved its nose as it walked. It would avoid dangerous places. Ning Shu asked the little mouse, You've been drifting in the void for so many years. Do you know any races or places that can produce energy bodies easily? Places like gold and diamond mines require geographical conditions. The little mouse straightened its body, touched its chin, and said, I quite like looking for Phoenix Spirit. Phoenix Spirit's place can produce energy bodies easily. To be honest, your place is really poor. Phoenix Spirit. Person's name. Place name. Ning Shu said, Then let's go find Feng Xian. Little Mouse looked at Ning Shu bitterly. I can't go to that place. It's all a trap for me. Ning Shu was speechless. He had forgotten that the little mouse was a locust-like existence. When faced with locusts, of course, he had to destroy them. Ning Shu took a deep breath and smiled at the little mouse. What about other places? Little Mouse blinked and looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu punched Little Mouse's head. Get out of here, the little mouse. Ning Shu asked, Why are you looking for energy bodies? I'd rather starve than look for them. This kind of thing is very hard to come by. Once it is discovered, there will definitely be a lot of people fighting over it. I don't have any subordinates right now, so I don't want to make a big fuss over a piece of energy. Ning Shu was speechless. Hearing his tone, she really wanted to hammer him to death. I don't want it because I'm too lazy to move. Little Mouse said, I'll take you to find some delicious food. Forget about energy bodies. Ning Shu said, I'm not a glutton. Of course, I'll accept good food, but I still want energy bodies. Little Mouse said, with our bodies, it's a little too easy to find energy bodies. So you know where energy bodies are? Ning Shu looked at Little Mouse. Little Mouse quickly shook its head. I didn't say that. I don't even know where they are. Ning Shu said, You did. Little Mouse said, I didn't. You did. I didn't. Ning Shu said, I didn't. Little Mouse said, You did. Ning Shu asked, Where? Little Mouse was speechless. Fuck your mother. Little Mouse rolled its eyes. Okay. I know a place that has them, but it's very dangerous. Even if I have subordinates, I won't go. Also, let me tell you. Little Mouse shook its leg proudly. I'm the only one who knows about this place. Ning Shu was speechless. What was it so proud of? Take me there. I need this thing. Little Mouse was a little hesitant. No, that place is really too dangerous. If you get swept up by the wind, you'll be turned into ashes. I accidentally went to that place before and lost half of my troops. You fought with my subordinates before. You should know how hard their bodies are. Even with such a strong body, they'll be turned into ashes in an instant. Ning Shu was speechless. It did sound a little scary. Ning Shu said. Then I'll go take a look. I won't let myself die. Little Mouse rolled its eyes at Ning Shu. You're saying the same thing as a man saying, if I don't go in, I'll just take advantage of you. Ning Shu looked disgusted. When did you become so vulgar? Little Mouse said, your words are vulgar, but you're right. Ning Shu said, I won't let myself take the risk. Little Mouse smiled maliciously. Okay, you can't blame me if you insist on looking for death. It's very far away. You have to be prepared. Ning Shu nodded. She had plenty of time anyway. Little Mouse walked in front and Ning Shu followed behind. They marked the location of the space node. After marking it, Little Mouse didn't need to lead the way next time. It was very convenient to perform space jumps. As they walked, Ning Shu felt that something was wrong. It was getting colder and colder. It was a coldness that penetrated deep into her soul. She was in soul form now, so normal coldness didn't affect her at all. However, this coldness made Ning Shu shiver. Little Mouse didn't seem to feel anything. It walked in front with its head held high. Ning Shu stopped in her tracks. Her lips were already turning black. I'm very cold. Little Mouse turned around. That's right. This energy body is in an extremely cold place. Normal people wouldn't be able to withstand it, especially with your weak soul. Ning Shu frowned. She couldn't help but rub her hands together to warm them up. If you continue walking, your soul will be completely frozen. Then, with a bang, it will explode into powder and be annihilated. This coldness is no joke. Even the creatures in the void won't be able to withstand this coldness. Do you still want to go? Little Mouse asked. Ning Shu took out the fire pearl and held it in her hand. Of course I want to go. Since I'm already here, I won't be satisfied if I don't experience it. The fire pearl was so hot. Holding it in her hand was like holding a heating pad. It dispelled the coldness on her body. She just didn't know how long she could last. Little Rat shrugged his shoulders. Okay, you can follow me. Little Mouse looked at the thin layer of fur on the surface of her body. She was actually able to withstand the cold. It really made people jealous. Fortunately, her brain wasn't good enough. If her brain was any smarter, she would really be in heaven. If she had a body, Ning Shu would probably be so cold that her snot would have flowed out. Her snot would have frozen into hard lumps. How much longer? Ning Shu asked. It was really too cold. Her soul couldn't take it anymore. Little Mouse didn't seem to care. It's still early. I already said it's very far. Chapter 3608. Ning Shu held the fire pearl and relied on it for warmth, but she still felt colder and colder. She didn't have a body, but she felt as if her body was frozen, and her movements were especially slow. There was a layer of frost on her soul. It was really cold. Ning Shu didn't know if she could make it to the destination. The little mouse walked in front, and Ning Shu quickly caught up with it. He picked up the little mouse and held it in his arms. Give me some warmth. His soul was covered in frost, but the little mouse wasn't. He held the little mouse in his arms, and he suddenly felt warmth from his hands. Yes, the little mouse was warmer than the fire pearl. The fire pearl was now dim, and the heat on it was almost exhausted. Usually, the little mouse wouldn't burn his hands, but now it was exceptionally warm. It was probably at a constant temperature. The little mouse said, "Damn, you're really cold. Let go." It struggled with all four limbs, but Ning Shu held it tightly. The more they walked, the colder Ning Shu felt. She couldn't help but hug the little mouse tighter. If she had known, she would have worn more clothes, or at least brought something to keep her warm. The little mouse didn't say anything in advance, so it probably didn't want to go to this place. Ning Shu's body stiffened, and she shivered as she asked, "How much longer?" "It's still early," the little mouse said nonchalantly. "This is just the beginning." Ning Shu was speechless. It was too cold. It was so cold that her brain was starting to become muddled. The little mouse looked at Ning Shu shivering, and asked, "Do you want to go back? Is there really an energy body in that place?" Ning Shu asked with a lisp. The little mouse nodded. "There is, but there's no way to get it. When I get there, I'm freezing. It's basically a land of death. Even the creatures in the void can't withstand it." Ning Shu wiped her nose, and she felt snot flowing out. "I want to take a look." Ning Shu said. She wanted to confirm if there was really an energy body in that place. Little Rat turned around and looked at Ning Shu, who was hunched over. "All right." Ning Shu felt cold, but at least he wouldn't die. With the will of death, he could hold on for a while. He took out another fire pearl and held it in his hand. With the addition of the little mouse, he didn't feel so cold anymore and his footsteps became much faster. As they walked, a blizzard appeared in front of them. Ning Shu looked at the snowstorm and was speechless. He had never seen such a big snowstorm. The snowflakes were the size of a palm, and they were dense and white. The wind was howling. Looking from afar, it was truly shocking. Ning Shu didn't want to go anymore. He asked the little mouse, "How far is it?" Little Mouse was annoyed by the questions. "It's very far. We were at the edge just now. We still have to pass through the snowstorm to reach the glacier. It's an unimaginably vast glacier." Ning Shu hammered his trembling legs and looked at the howling cold wind. He took a deep breath. They had walked for so long, and they were still at the edge of the glacier. Ning Shu asked the little mouse, "How did you get in before?" Little Mouse said, "Of course we relied on our race. We relied on a large amount of energy bodies to warm ourselves up. I was just curious about what was inside, so I went in for fun." Ning Shu was speechless. Some people could be willful when they were rich. Ning Shu took a deep breath and took out the fire pearl again. He said to the little mouse, "Let's go in." Little Mouse shook its head. "Let's not. You'll die." "No, we'll just teleport back." Little Rat sneered and looked at Ning Shu. "Do you think the wind is howling and the blizzard is so fierce that even the space nodes are disordered?" Ning Shu was already hesitant. Hearing the little mouse's words, he hesitated even more. "Let's go." Ning Shu stretched out his leg and tested it at the edge of the snowstorm. He immediately felt his leg go numb and quickly retracted it. "It's really cold," Ning Shu said. Little Mouse's eyes lit up. "Then shall we go back?" Ning Shu said, "Let's go. I can still bear it." Ning Shu held the little mouse and leaned forward into the snowstorm. The howling snowstorm penetrated his soul. Ning Shu shivered. It was so cold. Stepping on the thick snow, he left a trail of footprints that disappeared in an instant. Ning Shu hugged the little mouse tightly and absorbed the heat from Little Mouse's body. The little mouse's eyes rolled back. "Oh my God, yeah. Ning Shu was swept away by the snowstorm and left a trail of Ning Shu's cries in the air. In order to avoid being separated from the little mouse, Ning Shu hugged the little mouse tightly. This was her source of heat. Little Housey turned into a pool of water and wrapped Ning Shu up to escape from the hurricane. Ning Shu fell down and felt that his body was covered in a sticky liquid. This should be the little mouse's main body. After wrapping him up, he felt much warmer. It was airtight and he felt like the cold outside couldn't blow in. "Well done," Ning Shu praised. "Little mouse, go away. If you really want to thank me, give me 10 world sources." Who doesn't know how to say nice things? Ning Shu, "Okay, if you don't like nice things, I won't say them." Little mouse, with the protection of the little mouse's membrane, Ning Shu didn't feel so cold anymore. He also felt much faster. Whenever they encountered a hurricane, they would avoid it. However, they would often be swept away by the hurricane. The more he walked, the colder it got. Even with the protection of the little mouse, the coldness still seeped in. Once again, he was swept away by the hurricane. After getting rid of the hurricane, Little Mouse turned back into a mouse. He lay in Ning Shu's arms and sniffled. So cold. Ning Shu didn't have time to react and was instantly frozen. Ning Shu instantly turned into an ice sculpture. He was so lifelike that even his expression froze. Ning Shu, damn, you should have told me before you transformed. He was now an ice sculpture. He couldn't imagine how ugly his expression was now. Little Mouse had no choice but to put his hand on Ning Shu. The endless heat gradually melted Ning Shu's ice sculpture. The contact between the cold and the heat formed a majestic white smoke. Little Mouse was indeed a creature from the void. She had always said that he was useless, but in the environment of the void, he had a natural advantage. She became an existence that was dragging him down. She only had the will of death to support her. She didn't die even after being frozen into an ice sculpture. Little Mouse's body had 1 less HP than before. Damn, the energy I stored in my body is gone. It's gone. It's gone. Ning Shu stroked Little Mouse. It's okay, I'll give you a world source later. 100 world sources can't make up for the energy I lost. Do you know how long I've stored this heat? No, you don't know at all. Little Mouse was very sad. He hated himself for bringing her to this place. For a little bit of food, he lost more. The more he thought about it, the more unwilling he was. He wanted to eat it back. Chapter 3609. Ning Shu said, okay, I'll give you another one when we get back. You have no idea how much energy I've lost. Ning Shu said, don't worry, don't worry. Are we in a glacier? Ning Shu finally noticed his surroundings. It was an endless stretch of icebergs. The icebergs were so tall that he didn't know where they went. There was no end to it. Tall and numerous glaciers, it was like a god with uncanny workmanship. Fortunately, they were swept away by the hurricane for quite a bit of distance, so they arrived earlier than expected. Ning Shu raised his hand and looked around. Where are the energy bodies? Do you see the green dots embedded in the icebergs? Little Mouse said dispiritedly. Ning Shu looked carefully. Green dots, not just that. There are even rainbow-colored ones. Ning Shu discovered that there were faint starry things in the glacier. Compared to the dry glacier, these things looked only the size of mung beans and were not eye-catching at all. I only care about what I can eat. Little Mouse didn't care about other energy bodies at all. He only cared about the gentle energy bodies that contained life energy. Little Mouse couldn't help but drool. When he saw the energy bodies, he was very hungry. Especially after consuming so much energy, it was like consuming a lot of fat. If he continued to consume energy, Little Mouse would probably freeze to death. Ning Shu threw the fire bead that didn't have much heat toward the glacier. Before it even touched the glacier, the fire bead instantly turned into a lump of ice. Then, the lump of ice was quickly covered with cracks. Then, with a bang, it directly exploded. The broken ice shards reflected bits of starry light. It was quite beautiful. Ning Shu took a step back. Damn, this was probably the coldest energy in the legends. It was extremely cold. Ning Shu glanced at the energy bodies in the glacier and said to Little Mouse, let's go back. They were going back so quickly. Little Mouse was still a little unused to it. Ning Shu. Didn't I say before that I'm just going to take a look? With her current strength, there was no way she could extract these energy bodies. Before she could even get close, she would be annihilated, just like the fire pearl. Heat was energy, and so was cold. She couldn't bear this kind of energy. Alright, let's go back, the little mouse said listlessly. Ning Shu carried the little mouse and jumped through space. Because of the previous mark, the way back was much smoother. However, it was also destroyed by the power of the hurricane, so it would take a lot of time. The little mouse was also freezing. It kept sneezing and had a runny nose. When it returned to the system space, it stuck out its butt and lay on the sofa crying, mourning its loss of energy. Ning Shu touched its butt and comforted it, "If you can open this, I'll give you an energy body." Little Mouse looked at Ning Shu suspiciously. "You're so generous. Next time, I'll have to rely on you." Little Mouse, fuck you. Ning Shu glanced at his soul. It had dimmed a lot, destroyed by the power of ice and snow. Opening the chat system, Ning Shu contacted Senior Uncle and went straight to the point about the energy bodies. Then, they met to talk. Senior Uncle said to talk in the interrogation room. Ning Shu said, "No, we'll talk in my restaurant." He could still get a meal in the restaurant. Ning Shu picked up the little mouse and said, "Let's find someone who can mine." With so many colored energy bodies, Ning Shu felt that the god-beating whip could eat its fill. Little Mouse said weakly, "Whatever, I just want to sleep. I want to hibernate now. I've lost too much energy. Activities will cause more energy loss." Ning Shu gave it a world's origin. "Eat it. I'm very generous." Little Mouse sneered in disdain. It had never seen such a shameless thing. Little Mouse gnawed on the world's origin. When Ning Shu arrived at the restaurant, Senior Uncle was already waiting for her. He was drinking tea casually. Sure enough, he cared a lot and came earlier than her. "Why did you come to see him?" "Fuck, I can't eat anymore." Little Mouse smelled the smell on Senior Uncle and suddenly withered a lot. It jumped off Ning Shu's shoulder and disappeared. Ning Shu's nose twitched. It was really smelly. Why didn't she smell it? Ning Shu sat down, called the waiter, and ordered a table of expensive dishes. He said to Senior Uncle, "Talk while eating. It's a long story. Then make it short." Senior Uncle put down the teacup. Ning Shu said, "I can't make it short. At least the time of a meal. Oh, by the way, you can pay the bill." Senior Uncle said, "I'll pay the bill." Ning Shu said, Can't I pay the bill? I risked my life to get the information. Can't I eat a meal?" Senior Uncle narrowed his eyes. "A meal is enough." Ning Shu said, "Of course not. You wish. Call me Dad and I'll tell you." Senior Uncle looked at Ning Shu expressionlessly. "Are you itching for a beating?" The dishes came one after another. Senior Uncle gave his identity card to the waiter. After a while, the waiter took the card and returned it to Senior Uncle. Senior Uncle put away the identity card and didn't eat. Ning Shu said, "You're not eating." Senior Uncle said, "Not interested." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. According to this guy's stingy character, how could he not eat? Ning Shu's nose twitched. She didn't know if it was an illusion or if she had heard too much from the little mouse, but she also faintly smelled a rotten smell from Senior Uncle. Ning Shu stood up and walked around Senior Uncle. She sniffed from his back, neck, armpits, and neck. She could directly smell the smell of people. As she approached, she seemed to smell a faint smell. Ning Shu wanted to get closer, but a cold finger pressed her forehead. "Go away." Ning Shu sighed and returned to her seat. She continued eating. "Your body probably can't handle it anymore. You won't be able to digest it." Ning Shu looked at Senior Uncle. "You're not a walking corpse now, are you?" The Grand Elder smirked. "If I were a walking corpse, I would tear you apart immediately. Where's the specific location of the energy body?" Senior Uncle was too lazy to talk nonsense with her. Ning Shu said, "I can't even take a bite of my food. Let me eat something first." "You should eat too." I don't eat from the same plate as others. Ning Shu thought, damn, you're so particular. There are shared chopsticks, okay? Ning Shu told senior uncle about the glacier while eating. Senior uncle was expressionless, but he asked, why did you go there? Ning Shu said, to play. Senior uncle pondered and didn't speak. His eyes were a little unfocused, and no one knew what he was thinking. Ning Shu ate and said to senior uncle, I brought such a big piece of information. You have to give me soul fluid. My soul is weak now, so I can't take you to the glacier. And I want some of the extracted energy bodies. Her original intention was to find energy bodies for the Sea of Law. Even if they were scraps, she still wanted to get some energy bodies. Chapter 36:10. Ning Shu observed him while eating. She took a sip of tea to clear the taste in her mouth and said, looking closely, your skin is gray. You're actually dead. The grand uncle glanced at Ning Shu. You don't look at the skin to see if someone is dead or not. You look at the eyes. Ning Shu shook her head. No, you look at the skin. When the blood stops flowing, the skin immediately reacts. The grand uncle sneered. My cells are worlds. There's no such thing as blood. Ning Shu was speechless. Well, she really couldn't use an ordinary human body to identify the grand uncle. She really wanted to stab the grand uncle with a knife to see if there was no blood. But if she pierced his skin, how many worlds would collapse? There were about 37,200,000,000,000 cells in a person's body. Oh my, was there really so many worlds in the grand uncle's body? She didn't quite believe it. But what made Ning Shu unhappy was that the grand uncle was too calm when she told him the location of the energy body. He wasn't happy or disappointed. He felt that the information she got was worthless. Ning Shu asked, do you know this place? The grand uncle said casually, even you can find it. Do you think the other races in the void can't find it? Ning Shu asked, then why hasn't the glacier been developed yet? Since they knew there were energy bodies inside, why didn't they develop it? The grand uncle said, everyone tacitly agreed not to develop it. It's considered a sustainable development route. Ning Shu said, Tisk, isn't it because it's too cold and can't be developed? To be frozen into dregs by something thrown at him, even a void spirit would find it difficult to withstand such energy. And looking at the iceberg, who knew how long it had been there and how to dig it out? She felt that the void creatures were too lazy to care about things that took time. The grand uncle nodded. That's one thing. Ning Shu asked, then can you dig it out? Probably not. If he could, why didn't he dig it out? Why did he look for energy bodies everywhere? The Grand Elder didn't deny it. Firstly, mining is indeed difficult. Secondly, once someone does, those guys who are too lazy to count will swarm in. Ning Shu. What fur? Grand Uncle. Any fur is fine. Ning Shu exclaimed. How dirty. Ning Shu poured a cup of tea for the Grand Uncle and said, mining is difficult, but it can still be done. Look at you, you are now a walking corpse. You need energy. Like the Sea of Law, it also needs energy. Actually, no matter how much energy there was in the Sea of Law, it was probably just like that. However, it could be delayed for a while. The Grand Uncle glanced at Ning Shu, picked up the teacup with his slender fingers, and took a sip. You've always been lazy, but now you're worried about these things. Ning Shu was speechless. When had she ever been lazy? She had really risked her life for the sake of living, yet she was still being called lazy. What a great injustice. She was a very serious person. Ning Shu said, where there is an organization, there is home. I sincerely hope that the organization will last for thousands of years and last forever. Sect Master, your divine power is unparalleled. Sect Master Dongfang's divine power is unparalleled. The grand uncle said indifferently, you want energy bodies and use the organization as a raft. Are you planning to take a part of it? Ning Shu was really wronged. Her original intention was really pure. Even if she wanted to, she would give some scraps to the god-striking whip to let it evolve. However, Ning Shu quickly reacted and asked the grand uncle, have you entered the center? Have you seen the glacier? The grand uncle, of course. Ning Shu, nonsense, you definitely haven't entered. You don't know that there are many energy bodies embedded in the glacier. There are energy bodies of all colors. The grand uncle's hand that was shaking the teacup slightly paused, but he was still expressionless. It's difficult to excavate the glacier. I don't want to spend a lot of manpower and material resources to do such a thing. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. It was obviously difficult to mine, and ordinary souls would be frozen and annihilated after entering. Therefore, ordinary mission enforcers couldn't go in and mine. Ning Shu felt that even ordinary big shots wouldn't be able to resist this kind of cold energy. Could it be that the organization relied on non-humans to mine? However, even the creatures in the void might not be able to withstand this kind of temperature. They might freeze to death like ordinary humans. In the end, it was just that the price-performance ratio of mining wasn't good. Ning Shu, if we don't mine, do we have to rely on cheating to get energy bodies? The grand uncle. Cheating? Ning Shu nodded. Cheating. The grand uncle was a godlike person. The grand uncle put down the teacup. Okay, you don't have to worry about these things. It's useless for you to worry. The grand uncle stood up and was about to leave. Ning Shu stood in front of the grand uncle like the wind. Don't tell me you want to secretly mine behind my back. The grand uncle, I'm not as wretched as you. Fuck, how was she wretched? How was she lazy? Ning Shu asked, then where are you going next? I'll follow you. You'll definitely go to the glacier. You're crazy. If I knew there was such a place, I would have done it long ago. Ning Shu shook his head. No, you'll definitely go to the glacier deep in the snow to confirm if what I said is true. Are there energy bodies mixed in the glacier? The grand uncle. I don't know how long I've lived. When I'm bored, I wander around. I've been to all the places you've been to, and I've also been to places you haven't been to. Ning Shu frowned. Are you showing off that you're very old? Was this something to be proud of? Old fart. Ning Shu laughed. Explaining is covering up, and covering up is telling a story. Look at you talking so much. You're obviously guilty. Ning Shu wanted to pat the grand uncle's shoulder. Anla, it's okay if you want to see it. I'll take you. I'll mark the space. The grand uncle's shoulder tilted, avoiding Ning Shu's hand. Ning Shu didn't care at all. But it's really cold. I'm frozen stiff. If you want to go, you should ask Uncle Chang for some warm tools. Ning Shu shuddered as she spoke. By the way, my soul isn't good now. Give me some soul fluid to replenish it. The grand uncle looked at Ning Shu with a sneer. You really dare to ask? Do you think you've made a great contribution? Do you want to do this or that? Ning Shu flipped his hair. Of course. Otherwise, the information I brought while risking being frozen a few times wouldn't be worth anything. Don't bring ordinary mission enforcers in. They'll be frozen directly. Take them away quickly. The veins on the grand uncle's forehead jumped. When did I say I wanted to mine the glacier? Ning Shu sighed and felt it was a pity. I'm not going to mine it. There are so many energy bodies. He couldn't rely on his own strength. Chapter 36:11. Ning Shu hoped to mine the iceberg, but most of his feelings were for the Sea of Law. Reading a book a gauge. El Grand Uncle frowned and pinched his eyebrows. Okay, that's it. If you want soul fluid, go find Sang Liang. Don't talk anymore. Ning Shu, okay. Grand Uncle left. Ning Shu sat down again and finished a table of dishes before returning to the system space. Little Mouse was lying on the sofa in a drunken stupor. Ning Shu sat beside it and poked its soft belly. He said to Little Mouse, "Call your Li Wen. Let's find a way to mine the energy bodies ourselves." Little Mouse opened its eyes and sat up. It shook its head like an old man. "No, we can't do it alone. Mining this kind of thing requires a lot of manpower and resources. I don't have any subordinates now. But even if I do, I can resist the cold." Little Mouse was very greedy, but it was still very rational. "It's too cold. Even if we bring those machines, I don't think we can work properly. We'll be frozen into sculptures in an instant." Little Mouse saw its subordinates freeze into spectacular ice sculptures. With a touch, they would explode and explode into powder. They couldn't be any more dead. It had enough energy stored in its body and could barely resist it. But if it went again, Little Mouse felt that it would die. Ning Shu touched Little Mouse's head and sighed. It could only look and not eat. Thinking about it, she shouldn't be so worried. Grand Uncle wasn't worried, so why should she be? Even if she couldn't get the energy bodies of the iceberg, there were other energy bodies. She believed that the Sea of Law could still hold on for a while. If something really happened to the Sea of Law, she could slowly find a way out. She felt like the Emperor wasn't worried, but the eunuch was worried. It was as if she had some bad intentions. It seemed that the conditions of the iceberg were really difficult. The creatures in the void were also very lazy and lived for a long time. If humans saw the resources of the iceberg, they would probably think of ways to mine it. Little Mouse touched its chin and sighed. "Let's give up." Ning Shu felt his heart ache. It's a little hard to give up. If it wasn't difficult, you wouldn't have had the chance to see so many energy bodies. To be able to see so many energy bodies in this lifetime, you can consider it worth it. Oh, that's right, if I want soul fluid from Sang Liang, I should at least get something out of it. Ning Shu opened up the chat system and told Sang Liang about the soul fluid. Sang Liang didn't say much and gave him a small bottle of soul fluid. It was about the size of a Yakult bottle, but it was better than nothing. Ning Shu gulped down the Yakult and then removed all the impurities in it. The feeling of having a full soul was as comfortable as having a full meal. Ning Shu looked at the Little Mouse and took out another world origin for it. "Eat it." The Little Mouse took the world's origin and looked at Ning Shu suspiciously. It didn't eat it. "What are you trying to do now? Why are you suddenly acting like this?" Ning Shu punched the Little Mouse's head. "I didn't see that your energy consumption was high, so I gave you some fat." Fuck, how was she not a good person? The Little Mouse was even more suspicious. "Why did you give me some fat for no reason? You still want to go to the glacier?" Ning Shu. "Are you a masochist? I'm just being nice to you and you're doubting the world. Even if you don't go to the glacier, you still need a good body to go to other places." The Little Mouse made an "oh" sound and then hugged the world origin and gnawed. Ning Shu was speechless. Usually, if he didn't give it to it, it would cry out every day. Now that he gave it to it, it was suspicious as if it wanted to do something to it. Could she kill the Little Mouse? It was the king of a race. Ning Shu thought about it and decided to go do the mission. She was worried about the Sea of Law and seemed to be meddling in other people's business. The chat system dinged. Ning Shu opened it and saw that it was sent by the Grand Elder. He asked her to gather in the void and said that they were going to the glacier. Ning Shu suddenly laughed. Didn't he say that he wasn't going to mine? What was he doing now? Nothing in the world could escape the law of true fragrance. She definitely had to go. Maybe she could really get something. She could pick up the scraps on the side. Ning Shu picked up the little mouse and said, "Let's take the energy body." The little mouse was a little confused. "We're going to the glacier again. Let's go." This time, it was a lie. Ning Shu opened his hand to suck the god-beating whip over, but the god-beating whip was obviously reluctant to part with the energy body and didn't want to fly into Ning Shu's hand. "Ning Shu, be good, continue to suck when we come back." Only then did the god-beating whip reluctantly fly into Ning Shu's hand. Putting away the god-beating whip, he held the little mouse and jumped to the space node that the Grand Elder had given him. When he arrived, Ning Shu saw a group of people. Although it was a group of people, there weren't many. There was the Grand Elder, Sang Liang, and His Excellency in a tuxedo. He hadn't seen His Excellency for a long time. He felt that His Excellency had a soft light of fatherly love. As for the other two people, Ning Shu didn't know them. Ning Shu greeted them and then asked the Grand Elder, "How do you plan to mine?" The Grand Elder didn't speak. Ning Shu looked at Sang Liang, who pointed at his book. Ning Shu. He didn't quite understand. Ning Shu looked at His Excellency. His Excellency looked at Ning Shu and didn't speak. Fuck. They hadn't even reached the glacier yet. Why were they so cold? Ning Shu looked at Sang Liang's book and suddenly had an idea. He said in disbelief, "You're going to move the glacier directly?" Thinking about it carefully, this plan was the most likely. After all, the glacier was so cold. They couldn't dig the glacier bit by bit while enduring the cold. And even if you opened a hole in the front foot, your back foot might be frozen again. He directly used Sang Liang's book to throw the cut glacier into the space. The temperature outside was high. Without caring about the glacier, the ice would melt directly, and the energy body inside would be exposed. How much confidence did he have in himself to do such a thing? Of course, it would be better if he succeeded. She would have leftovers to take. Ning Shu thought about it and decided to bring the peerless martial arts with him. After all, the peerless martial arts were also in a space. If your space can't hold it, I can sacrifice my peerless martial arts to help you store the iceberg. Ning Shu returned to the system space, picked up the peerless martial arts, and returned to the space node. It only took a few seconds. The little mouse was also excited. Its saliva dripped onto Ning Shu's hand. Energy body, energy body. Sang Liang handed a bottle of potion to Ning Shu and said, "Apply it on your body." Ning Shu asked, "What's the use of this? Would it disfigure him if he applied it on his body?" Sang Liang said, "Cover your smell. There are races in the void with sharp noses that will track you down." Ning Shu immediately thought of what the Grand Elder said about those races that were too lazy to count their hairs. They probably wanted to take advantage of the situation. In the void, even the Grand Elder and Sang Liang had to be careful. Of course, it didn't exclude the possibility that they were too lazy to care about those races. Chapter 36:12. Ning Shu smeared the unknown liquid on his body and smelled it. There was no smell. He guessed that this thing also covered their smell. No, it probably didn't cover their smell, but the smell of Senior Uncle. If Little Rat could smell the smell of the Grand Elder's body, and it was very smelly, then other races could also smell it. Senior Uncle was the one who should apply this kind of thing, and he should apply a lot of it. Ning Shu asked Senior Uncle, "Did you apply it?" Senior Uncle. Everyone did. Ning Shu, who is everyone? I'm just asking you if you applied it. Senior Uncle. I did. Ning Shu rolled her eyes. If you want to wipe it off, then so be it. Why do you have to drag others into it? The team started to set off. Ning Shu whispered to Little Mouse, "Did you cover his smell?" Senior Uncle, who was walking in front, paused slightly and sped up. Little Mouse touched its nose with its paw. "It's okay. Ning Shu responded with a meaningful, "Oh." Some guesses in his heart were even more confirmed. After a few space jumps, they arrived at the periphery of the snowstorm. There was a dense snowstorm, and occasionally a hurricane whistled by. Ning Shu's body trembled. He thought of the suffocating cold again. It really made him shiver. Little Mouse turned into its mercury-like substance. Then, it stretched out and wrapped around Sang Liang's arm to prevent him from getting lost. Little Mouse thought about it and decided that it was the best choice to wrap around this person. The senior uncle in front was too smelly. His Excellency was really ugly. He didn't know the rest. Without a choice, this person was the only suitable candidate. However, when he saw him, he thought of how this guy ambushed him halfway and wiped out his race and subordinates. Just thinking about it made his heart ache. Sang Liang looked at the thing on his arm and didn't say anything. The space coordinates in the snowstorm were unstable. The ones that Ning Shu had marked before couldn't be sensed anymore. Ning Shu didn't dare to jump over one or two occasionally. He didn't know if the location had changed, but he didn't know where he would end up. The group of people turned to look at Ning Shu. Ning Shu blinked his eyes and remained as quiet as a chicken. He could only explain, "The space here isn't very stable. The position of my space node might have shifted." Sang Liang said, "If that's the case, let's walk. We have plenty of time anyway." The others had no objections and stepped into the snowstorm. Ning Shu immediately shivered. It was really fucking cold. It was 10,000 times more painful than waking up in the dead of winter. However, a warm current then spread through his soul, making Ning Shu feel alive again. The little mouse said, "This time I used up a lot of energy. You must give me the energy body." "Stop talking." They hadn't even gotten their hands on the energy bodies and they were already thinking about it. At the very least, when these people got their hands on the energy bodies, they would think of a way to get some. The snowstorm was very heavy. The group of people bent over to resist the wind. The whistling cold wind blew, and their clothes fluttered. The windbreaker of the senior uncle in front was blown up by the wind. With the little mouse blocking him, Ning Shu didn't feel the cold wind, but he still felt cold. However, it was within the range that he could bear and wouldn't freeze to death. This was also the little mouse's way of saving energy. The deeper they went, the colder it became. At this time, Ning Shu, who was relatively weak, was in a bit of a difficult situation. Although the little mouse had helped Ning Shu resist a lot of the cold, he was still shivering. Ning Shu took out a fire bead and held it, feeling more comfortable. Because there were many people this time, and they were all powerful existences, they avoided the snowstorm before it came over, unlike Ning Shu who was easily swept away. Ning Shu was sandwiched in the middle and felt really at ease. Sure enough, winning without doing anything was the best. He felt that he was useless. Seeing that there was no danger and that the people in front could avoid the hurricane, the little mouse withdrew its limbs that were wrapped around Sang Liang. After all, wrapping also required energy. And it was also very cold after the energy was dispersed. The group of people was silent. They only reminded each other when they encountered danger. At other times, they buried their heads and walked forward, leaving a string of footprints. Ning Shu looked at the people around him. They didn't seem to be cold, and the palm-sized snowflakes that floated to their bodies quickly melted. There wasn't even water vapor left behind, and there was no trace on their bodies. Well, they were indeed men. They were so vigorous and weren't afraid of the cold at all. The atmosphere was too quiet. Ning Shu moved to the side of His Excellency and asked in a low voice, "How's the child recently?" "His Excellency, not bad." "Ning Shu, how about cultivation?" "His Excellency, not bad." "Ning Shu, has he grown up a little?" "His Excellency, not bad." Ning Shu, damn. This topic couldn't be continued. Obviously, he didn't want to talk to her. Ning Shu also moved away. He couldn't be bothered to talk to His Excellency. The few of them were fine. They directly sent her away without any news. Ning Shu shivered. It was getting colder and colder. They were probably close to the glacier. The little mouse was a little strained. It was probably giving up its capital. The endless icebergs stretched as far as the eye could see. How much energy was used to freeze so many glaciers? The problem was how to get the glaciers into the space one after another. The tip of the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. The icebergs that emerged were only part of it. Hidden under the thick ice were probably even more terrifying icebergs. If they wanted to uproot them, it was probably impossible, and it would affect the glaciers next to them. What was even more terrifying was that these emerging glaciers might be a piece of ice under the ice layer. Then, only the exposed glaciers could be cut in half. Ning Shu took a deep breath. It was too cold. Senior Uncle took out a black long sword, jumped up, and slashed at the glacier. With a clang, the thick iceberg remained motionless. The iceberg directly reflected the power of the sword. Senior Uncle slashed many times in a row, but they were all reflected. Moreover, his sword was covered with a thick layer of frost. It was quite beautiful. Senior Uncle clenched his fist and put it in front of his mouth. He coughed slightly. His face was getting paler. There were only shallow sword marks on the glacier. Sang Liang frowned and touched his eyebrows. This glacier is really thick. It's not easy to deal with. A trident appeared in His Excellency's hand. It turned into a huge yiksha. It was especially ugly. It jumped up, raised the huge and heavy trident, and stabbed at the iceberg. The trident was deeply inserted into the iceberg. It was quickly covered with frost. It directly froze His Excellency's trident, and he couldn't pull it out. Ning Shu was speechless. What a powerful ice. If she touched the iceberg, she would probably be crippled. His Excellency took a deep breath and pulled the trident out with all his strength. He put away the trident and turned into a human wearing a tuxedo. There's a reason why this thing exists until now. His Excellency frowned. Chapter 36:13. Little Rat was dumbfounded. His whole body was not in a good state. If these people couldn't do it, how much energy would it have wasted? It couldn't live anymore. The little mouse reduced its energy output. Ning Shu was the first to feel very cold. She took out a fire bead to resist the cold. Obviously, the little mouse had no confidence in these people. Seeing that the senior uncle and His Excellency couldn't do it, the others didn't go alone. Sang Liang had no desire to do it. Ning Shu said in a trembling voice, "Let's just leave if we can't." It was too cold. These men could withstand it, but she couldn't. She was the prettiest girl in the village. She couldn't freeze to death here. Sang Liang said, "Since we're here, we have to get something." The problem was that they had to deal with the iceberg. The marks left behind by the Grand Elder and His Excellency had already recovered. If they couldn't break the iceberg in one go, it would freeze again in an instant. It was tiring to do it over and over again. Anyway, Ning Shu felt that she couldn't deal with these icebergs with her current strength. Ning Shu wanted to stretch out her vines and pull up the iceberg, but she gave up the idea when she thought of the horrible ice power. In an instant, the ice power froze the vines and froze her along with the vines. The senior uncle frowned. The black sword in his hand gradually grew bigger. Black lines appeared on his face, like black blood vessels spreading from his neck to his face. His eyes were blood red. Berserk state. He raised the huge sword and sped up. He held the sword horizontally and slashed at the iceberg. The huge impact made the iceberg tremble. There was a loud clanging sound. The sound was very sharp and harsh. Countless ice shards sprayed out from the place where the sword and the iceberg came into contact. The senior uncle's windbreaker blew. In an instant, the sword pierced through the iceberg. Then, the iceberg was cut in half. The others who were watching from the side immediately leaped up. A few of them lifted the iceberg up to prevent it from freezing again. The book in Sang Liang's hand floated up. He flipped open the book, and one of the pages floated up. It grew bigger and bigger until it covered the iceberg. The few of them worked together to throw the iceberg into the page. Book page immediately collected the iceberg, and the iceberg was left undealt with. Just this iceberg alone contained a lot of energy bodies. If he owned an iceberg, it would be like owning an entire world. Ning Shu looked at the brick-like peerless martial art in his hand and then looked at the thick cowhide book with countless pages. Sigh, the peerless martial arts were so disappointing. He thought that he would return empty-handed this time. He didn't expect that these people were still hiding their strength. The Grand Elder was a little out of breath. After a short rest, his face was covered with more wrinkles, almost covering his entire face. It was as if the black meridians were protruding. The Grand Elder continuously swung his sword at several icebergs, and they were all moved into the pages of the book. Ning Shu saw a slightly smaller iceberg and immediately shouted, "Put it down and let me do it." Sang Liang glanced at Ning Shu and didn't say anything. He put the page away, and the others took the opportunity to throw the iceberg to Ning Shu. To be honest, these people were holding a huge iceberg. It was as if ants were holding something countless times bigger than themselves. It was strange no matter how one looked at it. Ning Shu didn't know if his peerless martial art could bring the iceberg in. He could only use his mind to communicate with the peerless martial art. After all, it was a world of faith. Keep. Ning Shu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. If she was hit by the iceberg, she would be finished. After all, there were so many energy bodies inside. The little mouse stretched out its tentacles and was ready to catch the iceberg. With so many energy bodies, it was willing to die under the iceberg. Fortunately, the peerless martial art lived up to its expectations. It actually swallowed the iceberg at the last moment. However, the peerless martial art was affected by the iceberg. Its surface was covered with frost and was especially cold. It was frozen into a cold brick. There was no need to mention how happy Ning Shu was. He didn't expect Sang Liang to be so generous and really give him an iceberg. Although it was the smallest one, and there didn't seem to be many energy bodies inside. However, Ning Shu originally came with the intention of picking up scraps. There was no expectation, but there was an unexpected surprise. Sang Liang said to the Grand Elder, "Don't do it. It's a bit noisy. Someone might have noticed." The sword in the Grand Elder's hand gradually shrank and finally disappeared. The black lines on his face also faded. Ning Shu was a bit confused. Was it a basic configuration for the creatures in the void? Would they all go berserk? Ning Shu put away the ice block. When she was free, he would ask Ah Wan to help him bake it. Ah Wan had the law of fire imprint on her body. Her peerless martial art wasn't as strong as Sang Liang's. Why didn't Sang Liang's book freeze into an ice block? The mission was completed. The group went back the way they came. They walked to the edge of the snowstorm and found that the edge was particularly lively. Many races were actually waiting for rabbits. It seemed that the movement of the glacier had already been noticed by the creatures in the void. Ning Shu looked at the others. There was no special expression on their faces. They were especially calm. Obviously, they had already thought of this possibility. It was the first time Ning Shu saw so many void races gathered together. There was a beautiful bird with a body full of colorful lights. It used its beak to comb its hair, but the moment it opened its mouth, it cursed. "XXX, are you an idiot? Fuck you." Ning Shu was speechless. There was also a huge one with 2 legs that were as long as pillars supporting the sky. It was a veritable long leg, but it didn't feel beautiful at all. No matter what it was, if it was enlarged, it wouldn't feel beautiful. In short, there were many races that looked like humans and animals gathered here. Didn't they say that these races were so lazy that they counted hairs when they had nothing to do? Why were they so diligent? Killing people and letting go of the golden belt. They wanted to take advantage of it. A very beautiful bird spread its wings and asked the Grand Elder, "Yo, did you mine the iceberg? How was it? Did you get it?" The Grand Elder said coldly, "Go inside and take a look. $%, I'm not going. It will dim the color of my feathers." The bird first cursed a series of vulgarities, then raised its chin and said proudly. The other races looked at the Grand Elder and his group. The Grand Elder said in a low voice, "I'm in a bad mood now. Don't provoke me. Hey, don't bluff. You can't beat so many of us." The bird began to be arrogant again. The Grand Elder glanced at it. "If you talk again, I'll twist your neck." The bird immediately shrank its neck. The races next to it all sneered, unceremoniously watching a joke. Chapter 36:14. The bird wasn't convinced, but it was pushed to the back by the birds of the same race. A giant said to Taishu in a low voice, "You borrowed the energy body this time. It's time to return it." Taishu lifted his eyelids expressionlessly. "When? I don't remember." The giant's expression trembled. He angrily said when and where. Taishu nodded. "That was a newly born energy body. You didn't get it, so you said I borrowed it. Find another excuse." The giant was so angry that he cursed like a bird. "You motherfucker. You said it yourself. You told us not to snatch it. You borrowed it from us." Taishu didn't feel guilty at all. "I told you not to snatch it. You didn't snatch it. Are you fools?" Ning Shu felt that it was impossible for Taishu to take out the thing in his pocket. He suddenly felt that the creatures of the void were so naive. They still believed that Taishu would return it. They were thinking too much. However, the giant had a fierce look. When he was angry, his aura was so strong that it was hard to breathe. Coupled with his huge body, it gave people a considerable sense of oppression. However, although the giant looked a little silly, he didn't actually attack. He didn't want to let others take advantage of him. Moreover, it could be seen that the giant was still very afraid of Taishu. They wouldn't attack if they could. Ning Shu felt that he was an AFK teammate, watching these people fight and kill. Facing so many void creatures at once, Ning Shu measured his own strength. He couldn't beat them. However, he still took out the god-beating whip. If they really fought, it would be a good opportunity to test his strength and the gap between him and the void creatures. These races all had innate skills and were definitely blessed by the heavens. For example, the little mouse. In its original state, it wouldn't die even if it was cut in half. The water-like little mouse could split into many small water droplets. It wouldn't die even if it had one droplet. It was simply a bug-like existence. It was born with great strength. It was really enviable. These races tacitly surrounded them. Obviously, they wanted to attack. Taishu glanced at these people and condensed a black sword in his hand. "Are you sure you want to fight? I don't have an energy body." These races weren't sure if Taishu had an energy body. The giant said, "We sense the changes in the glacier. We don't believe you if you say you don't have an energy body. Grand Uncle, it's none of my business whether you believe it or not." The Grand Uncle's face was covered with black veins. Even his hands were covered with black veins. The black sword emitted a faint black smoke, giving off an ominous and oppressive feeling. The people from the other races frowned and looked hesitant. The abyssal prefect transformed into a giant Yiksha with a trident in his hand. His body was so huge that it was almost as big as the giants. Everyone else had reverted to their original forms. Sang Liang remained unmoved, holding his book, still looking like a noble. Sandwiched between a group of tall men, Ning Shu felt a sense of security. In this confrontation, no one made the first move. Ning Shu held the god-beating whip and waited, but these people didn't make the first move. It seemed that these races wanted to attack, but they were afraid that Tai Shu's body didn't have an energy body. Then, they would fight for nothing. But if they didn't make the first move, it would be too embarrassing to surround them aggressively and then retreat. The beautiful bird suddenly patted its head with its wings. $%. I think it's time to pick the fruits in my house. I'm leaving. With that, it spread its wings and flew away in a whirlwind. The birds of the same race also flew away. Seeing this, the other races also left one after another. Obviously, they felt that it wasn't worth fighting if they didn't get anything. Obviously, they were lazy. Maybe they liked energy bodies, but it didn't seem to be the time to fight. Tai Shu snorted and left with his sword, completely ignoring these people. Ning Shu was speechless. That's it? Were the creatures of the void land so interesting? They obviously had fewer people on their side. Why not? How lazy. When they were far away, Tai Shu put away his sword, and the lines on his face and hands faded away. Ning Shu said, "Then I'll go back." After leaving the wind and snow, they could directly return to the space system. She wanted to go back and cook the ultimate martial art so that the iceberg could melt as soon as possible. Sang Liang nodded. The energy bodies in the iceberg are average. You can keep the other half. Ning Shu nodded. Got it. Within the acceptable range, even if it was half, there were still a lot of energy bodies. There were all kinds of energy bodies. Ning Shu carried the thinner little mouse back to the system space. The little mouse jumped high on the sofa. Quick, let the iceberg melt. I'm really starving. Ning Shu took out the ultimate martial art. The temperature of the entire system space dropped a lot, and frost quickly spread out. The spirit pool was directly frozen, and the spirit fish swimming in it couldn't move. They wouldn't freeze to death, right? It was really cold. Ning Shu rubbed his arms, took out the remaining 2 fire pearls, and put them in front of the ultimate martial art. But in an instant, the surface of the fire pearls was covered with frost, and then the frost slowly melted, forming water pearls. Alas, even the fire pearls didn't work. It seemed that he really needed to find Awan to incubate it. If he relied on the iceberg to melt naturally, he really didn't know how long he would have to wait. The little mouse jumped on the sofa. Energy body, energy body. Think of a way to melt the ice quickly. Ning Shu said, or you can hold it and use your body temperature to melt it. The little mouse waved its hand. No, my energy consumption is too serious. I can't bear it. Ning Shu took the ultimate martial art to the City of Fire. The City of Fire had residual power of the Law of Fire, which could accelerate the melting of the iceberg. After entering the City of Fire, he felt a heat. When the heat and cold came into contact, the ultimate martial art began to roll its eyes, but its surface was still covered with a thick layer of ice. Ning Shu was worried that this icy cold energy would freeze the peerless martial art. But if she didn't pretend, she might not be able to get anything. If she didn't fight for it, Sang Liang wouldn't give it to her. What she needed was a thick skin. Thick skin to eat enough. Ning Shu contacted Awan and asked her for help. Awan received the news and came to the City of Fire. When he saw Awan, Ning Shu wanted to stick to Awan's body because Awan's body was really warm. Ning Shu held Awan's hand. It was so warm, he liked it. Awan. Why is it so cold? Ning Shu, I came back from a world of ice and snow, so it's cold. If it was a body, she would be a corpse now. Ah One asked, why are you looking for me, /BK? Chapter 36:15. The little mouse now treated the brick-like peerless martial art as its own private property. When it saw Ning Shu leave with the peerless martial art, it also followed. Usually, it would either lie on the sofa and sleep soundly or go find Li Wen. Now that Ning Shu came to find Ah Wan, it also followed. The power of the ice probably remained in its body, making it feel a little uncomfortable. Feeling that Ah Wan's body was very warm, it condescendingly jumped onto Ah Wan's shoulder. Ning Shu also sat close to Ah Wan and asked her to help melt this piece of ice. Ah Wan thought it was not a big deal. Melting a piece of ice was a simple matter. Ah Wan agreed without thinking. After all, she owed Ning Shu a favor and had to learn how to deal with star stones by Ning Shu's side. In the future, she might be the person in charge of District D. Becoming the person in charge meant that she would have resources. This was not a small favor. Ah Wan felt ashamed to accept it. Now that there was a chance to repay it, of course, she had to do it. She did not like to owe people things and favors. But it was a little difficult for Ah Wan to learn how to deal with star stones. No one taught her. Ah Wan had just started picking up fragments not long ago and was not very familiar with these big shots. It was not good for her to ask to learn how to deal with star stones. If there was nothing, she would not go in front of the judges and the higher-ups. Ning Shu proposed to let Ah Wan learn how to deal with star stones. It could be said that it was exactly what she wanted. Ah Wan could not refuse. Although Ning Shu had the intention of being a hands-off shopkeeper, to Ah Wan, a favor was a favor. This was something that could not be erased. Ah Wan took the ice brick and immediately felt that her soul was frozen. Especially since Ah Wan's soul was weaker now, she felt even more uncomfortable. Fortunately, there was the law of fire imprint, which dispelled the cold. But Ah Wan still felt that her soul was cold. The ice brick in her hand was emitting a bone-piercing power. This made Ah Wan very surprised. Ning Shu looked at Ah Wan's expression and asked, "Is it very difficult? If it is, then forget it." Ning Shu originally wanted to throw the ice bricks into the water, but Ning Shu thought that the water might freeze in an instant. When that happened, he would have to melt even bigger ice lumps. If Ah Wan was in a difficult position, Ning Shu could only let the ice bricks melt naturally. There was no other way. It's not that difficult. Let's go to the city lord's mansion. This ice is really powerful. Ning Shu said and followed Ah Wan to the Fire City's city lord mansion. The little mouse was curled up on Ah Wan's shoulder. When the wind blew, the fur on its body formed a whirlpool, revealing its bony skin. Ning Shu took a look. This time, the little mouse had really lost a lot of blood. It was chubby and had really lost weight. If water was used to wet its fur, its entire body would probably only be the size of a thumb. Ning Shu's conscience hurt a little. He reached out and touched Little Mouse. Little Mouse turned around and glanced at Ning Shu. "What are you doing?" That infuriating gaze. Ning Shu didn't even have a conscience this time. Anyway, Little Mouse was here for a mouthful of food. If it wanted to eat, it had to work hard. There was nothing wrong with that. When they arrived at the city lord's mansion, it was very hot. It seemed that the remnant power of the law was still stronger than the city lord's mansion. If an ordinary person came in, they would have fainted from the heat. But to Ning Shu, this temperature was very comfortable. He was severely frozen previously. He didn't even know if it would affect his soul. He still had to eat more kidney-strengthening fruits. Otherwise, his soul wouldn't be able to withstand the destruction. He felt that there was still a lot of power in the void. It was very cold today, but it might be very hot tomorrow. It could directly vaporize people and their souls. When the temperature was high, even the steel bars would directly melt. Human bones couldn't withstand such a temperature. The temperature of the city lord's mansion was at least 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. But when the brick was inside, it still didn't move. 3 feet of ice wasn't formed in a day. It looked like a small ice brick, but there was an entire world inside this ice brick. It was an entire world that was frozen. It wanted to melt the ice layer of a world. If it was naturally thawed, Ning Shu didn't know how long it would take. He glanced at Little Mouse. If it didn't eat anything else and insisted on eating the energy body, it would probably starve to death. Ah Wan formed a seal with both hands and set up a pond. The pond wasn't filled with water, but fiery red magma that was bubbling. The scorching temperature caused the surrounding air to distort due to the evaporation. It was the incarnation of the fire law after all. It could create such a large pond of magma with a raise of its hand. The temperature was very high. He believed that it would melt a little faster. Ah Wan looked at Ning Shu and asked, "You can put this in here. If you put it in here, there will be an array formation to gather the fire law in the surroundings." Ah Wan was worried that this was something precious. If it was thrown into the magma, it would be wasted. Little Mouse said directly, "Throw it in and quickly thaw it." It didn't care what it was. To Little Mouse, no matter how precious it wasn't as important as the energy body. If it hadn't tried hard to restrain itself, Little Mouse would have hugged the ice brick and gnawed on it. Ning Shu thought about it. The ultimate martial art was a world of faith. It had survived the devouring of the law of nothingness. A mere fire shouldn't be a problem. Ning Shu nodded. "It's okay. Throw it in." Thawing the ice brick as soon as possible was the most important. Little Mouse was already going crazy. With such conduct, it didn't look like a king of a race. It was really a disgrace. Although he had gained something this time, the detector that Ning Shu had thrown out previously couldn't sense anything now. The void was really too big. It was so big that even if it wasn't damaged, Ning Shu's soul couldn't sense it anymore. Ning Shu didn't have much hope. After receiving Ning Shu's reply, Wan didn't have any psychological burden. She threw the ice brick into the magma. Ah Wan thought that the ice brick would slowly melt after she threw it in. After all, this kind of magma could even melt steel. However, the ultimate martial art floated in the magma. The layer of ice on it didn't melt. Instead, the color of the magma dimmed. It started to turn gray, as if a layer of grass and wood ash had been sprinkled on it. It wasn't as red and hot as before. This was a sign that the temperature of the magma had dropped. Ah Wan was a little stunned. What kind of ice was this? Was it so powerful that even magma couldn't melt it? Ah Wan gathered the power of the law of fire. The magma started to bubble again. It was scarlet red, but not long after, the color started to dim again. Ah Wan was speechless. This was a little awkward. She thought it would melt quickly. Ah Wan's expression became much more serious. She no longer treated this ice brick as an ordinary ice brick. Ning Shu said, "Take it slow. I still have to trouble you." She didn't expect it to melt immediately. If the power of the ice mountain was so simple, it would have been eaten up by the creatures in the void long ago. She wouldn't have a chance to get it. Good things were never too late. It was just that Little Mouse had to wait. Chapter 36:16. The Little Mouse was no longer squatting on Wan's shoulder, but on Ning Shu's head. Looking at the stubborn ice brick, its expression was extremely desperate. The high temperature curled its hair, and the top of its head was roasted bald. The Little Mouse was so angry that it spat a mouthful of saliva on the magma, but it evaporated with a sizzle. It could be seen that the temperature was very high. The Little Mouse mourned and was completely exhausted. It lay on the top of Ning Shu's head like a lump, lifeless and useless mouse. Ning Shu felt that thawing was still a relatively distant matter, so it was inevitable that one would pay attention to the situation of this ice brick all the time. If she didn't take a look for a long time, the magma in this pool would directly become a thick layer of ice. That was a whole world of ice. One nodded, I know. I will gather the surrounding fire rules so that the magma will not be extinguished. Ning Shu said that he was in trouble and wanted to remind Wan twice. Then he felt a numbness in his chest. There was a slight electric tingling feeling, followed by the crackling sound of electric current. Ning Shu looked down and saw that the necklace pendant was making crackling sounds. Damn, the seal was broken. It must have been frozen by the strong power of ice when they went to the ice mountain. Ning Shu quickly took off the necklace and held it in his hand. His fingers hurt from the electric current, as if they were pricked by needles. Ning Shu sighed, damn, what should I do? The mark of the law of thunder was already very powerful before, and that was the power after it was sealed. If the seal was broken, the power in the mark of the law of thunder would swarm out, and the whole fire city would become a sea of thunder, directly destroying this space. Ning Shu said to Wan, I'll go first. This thing is troublesome. Wan nodded. Ning Shu returned to the system space as if his butt was on fire. He clicked on Tai Shu, hesitating whether to ask Tai Shu to reseal this thing. If he left it alone, where should he put this thing? What a large thunder sea, whether in the world of samsara or in the system space, it was a burden. What's more, with such a large sea of thunder, the souls in the world of samsara would probably be wiped out by the thunder and lightning. But if he were to look for senior uncle, he wouldn't work for free. Ning Shu placed the necklace on the coffee table and prepared to seal it with his own power. Ning Shu didn't want to deal with the Grand Elder unless it was absolutely necessary. Otherwise, he would bleed. As long as it didn't involve his own interests, Ning Shu could just watch from the sidelines and make some idle remarks. Ning Shu formed a seal with both of his hands and tapped the pendant with his finger. The pendant crackled with electricity. Where there was oppression, there would be resistance. Ning Shu's seal actually allowed the thunder laws to counterattack, erupting with even stronger lightning. With crackling sounds, Ning Shu was electrocuted. Even the coffee table exploded into pieces. Ning Shu spat out smoke and trembled as he looked for the Grand Elder. It was nothing more than being extorted. When asking for help, one had to be aware of this. She wanted to use her own power to seal it, but when she became stronger, she didn't know what would happen to this thing. Ning Shu asked where the Grand Elder was and said that he had something to talk to him about. The Grand Elder only said the word Sea of Laws and ignored Ning Shu. When Ning Shu arrived at the Sea of Laws, the Ligua clan was still doing their best to purify the Sea of Laws. Looking at the dirty Sea of Laws, it didn't look like it had been purified at all. The Grand Elder stood beside the Sea of Laws, motionless. The corners of his windbreaker fluttered slightly. This was probably the feeling of a hero past his prime. It was the kind of sad feeling of his country dying. Ning Shu walked over and didn't mention the Thunder Law's imprint. He asked, how long more do you need to purify it? He didn't believe that the Ligua clan would keep guarding the Sea of Laws. He couldn't figure out how the Grand Elder threatened the Ligua clan to make them do their best to purify the Sea of Laws. Although it didn't seem to be of any use. The Grand Elder glanced at Ning Shu, who was crackling with lightning, and didn't say anything. Ning Shu's body was numb from the electricity. Originally, things like lightning were the natural enemy of souls. Ning Shu didn't want to waste his soul for nothing. Ning Shu raised his hand in front of the Grand Elder and opened his hand, revealing the crackling lightning. He said, Judge, please help me. I've given you the seal of the Thunder Law's imprint. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have walked around with this thing. Speaking of which, she didn't use this thing much. After this seal, Ning Shu planned to put this thing in the system space and not run around with it. It was too dangerous in the void. What if the power of the seal was consumed again? Ning Shu revealed a standard 8-tooth smile and looked at the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder raised his eyelids and chuckled. If you like people to call you Daddy, you can call me Daddy too. Every dog has its day. Let's see who the heavens will spare. How long has it been? Ning Shu opened his mouth and asked, will you help me seal it if I call you Daddy? The Grand Elder said, your daddy is so valuable. Are you living in a dream? Ning Shu was expressionless. Then what the hell do you want to do? The Grand Elder did the same. He used Ning Shu to wipe the stone and sat down. Ning Shu held back her anger and dragged her skirt back. Damn it. Next time, she would never drag such a long skirt and be used as a rag for no reason. Ning Shu suddenly had a strong urge to transform and make her skirt shorter. She was embarrassed to use her skirt as a rag. Ning Shu sat down and propped up his chin as he sighed, seeing the sea of laws like this, it truly hurts. The Grand Elder glanced at her. Ning Shu thought that it wasn't fun to be stabbed in the heart when she had a request. At least, she had to wait until the matter was resolved before stabbing. Ning Shu said, I'll process the star stone 100 times for free. The Grand Elder said, heh, Ning Shu frowned. Then 1,000. The Grand Elder said, heh heh, Ning Shu made up her mind. 5,000, the Grand Elder said, heh heh heh, Ning Shu said, hey your sister. Ning Shu gritted her teeth and rubbed her cheeks. Then how many times do you want to say it? The Grand Elder said, I'm not active in Area D recently. Ning Shu immediately crossed her arms and made an X with a face full of rejection. I won't do it. The Grand Elder said, I won't do it either. Ning Shu could only say, wait for a while more. Naturally, someone will be willing to take over Area D. When A1 had the ability to process the star stone, she would naturally take care of Area D's affairs. Ning Shu didn't doubt A1's strength at all. A1 looked steady and reliable. At least she was more reliable than the greasy Chongsam man. Do you think it's better for me to guard Area D or look for treasures in the void? Area D was comparable to the Sea of Laws. This time, she had risked being frozen to death to find the iceberg. Speaking of the iceberg, Ning Shu thought of the lines on the Grand Elder's face and couldn't help but look at his face carefully. He couldn't help but say, you're already like this. Can't you be kinder? Chapter 36:17. Of course, he would make a clear offer and then bargain. However, there was no such thing as bargaining for the Grand Uncle. She was unwilling to become the person in charge of Area D. Logically speaking, this was a promotion and wealth. However, she had to be in charge of Area D and listen to the people below her when she had nothing to do. If something happened to someone, she could not ignore it. It was quite uncomfortable to have to deal with the cross-eyed man for some resources. With the little mouse around, Ning Shu wanted to make the best use of everything and then stroll in the void when she had nothing to do. Maybe she could even make friends in the void. Although it was very likely that the races in the void would not care about her at all. However, who could say for sure what would happen in the future? No matter what she did, it was happier and more meaningful than being the person in charge of Area D. In short, if she wanted to become the person in charge of Area D, Ning Shu looked at Li Gua in the middle of the Sea of Law. If she could not solve this thing, then she would exchange it with Li Gua. It was not a big deal. It was nothing more than one less law power. It was not a big deal. She would treat it as if she had never owned this thing and would not feel anything. Once she thought it through, Ning Shu really felt comfortable all over. Breaking apart. If this thing was rarely used, or if she did not need it, or if the cost was greater than the gain. She could throw it away or not. As for whether the Grand Uncle was willing to help her seal it, it was not so important. At this point, she would not be tired by ordinary things. If she wanted to pursue something, she would pursue something more advanced. Although it hurt a little when she broke apart, Xi and Zhong felt inexplicably relaxed after the pain. Without the need for the grand-uncle, Ning Shu was much more confident in facing him. She put away the necklace and called out to Li Guo when she was resting. Her relationship with Li Guo could be said to be tense, but it wasn't to the point where they would fight to the death. She was not willing to deal with the Star Stone for free 10,000 times. 10,000 times, that meant that she had to deal with 10,000 collapsed planes. This was not something that could be done in a short time. If she was not satisfied with this, then forget it. After all, she did not say anything when she used the Thunder Law. Strictly speaking, she had not used it at all. If the seal had not loosened this time, she would have probably forgotten that she had such a thing hanging around her neck. This thing was good, but it wasn't something he could use. It didn't matter even if he exchanged it. The mission enforcer probably wouldn't be able to accept it, so he might as well give it to Li Guo. Ning Shu propped up his chin as he waited for Li Guo. Lightning flashed all over his body as he said, "Has the iceberg melted? If it has, put some energy inside." The Sea of Laws was dead silent. Since there were energy bodies, they should be used on the Sea of Laws, as their original intention was to find energy bodies for the Sea of Laws. Big Head would definitely be used on the Sea of Laws. Senior Grand Uncle, yes, I've used it. Ning Shu was speechless. It had already melted. How did it melt? Her peerless martial art was still a piece of ice spinning, but the other party's iceberg had already melted. Ning Shu said expressionlessly, "Even the little mouse eats energy. You don't seem to have much time left. Why don't you take a bite or two?" The Grand Elder could probably eat an energy body full of vitality. The silver-haired man did not eat ordinary food. Could it be that he also ate energy bodies? Each one of them was like the little mouse. Senior Grand Uncle's expression was inexplicable. What gave you the illusion that I don't have much time left? Ning Shu, intuition. Your body stinks. Can't you smell it? It was the smell of decay and death. Come, return to the embrace of the will of death. Senior Grand Uncle's eyes became a little pitiful. It was pity for Ning Shu. Idiot. If not for the fact that he couldn't beat him, Ning Shu would have wanted to kill him. When the god-beating whip evolved a little, he would definitely test it on him and whip him to death. Ning Shu snorted. Good intentions are treated as bad fertilizer. Senior Grand Uncle frowned. Do you think you can get someone to solve the seal for you just by saying a few words? Ning Shu raised his chin and glared at Senior Grand Uncle. No need. I've decided to exchange something with Li Guo. Anyway, this thing is useless on me. Senior Grand Uncle, a wise decision. As long as you're a soul, you won't be able to control it and will be devoured. If it's sealed, its power will be reduced again. It's useless. Ning Shu, I think so too. She wanted to cultivate the god-beating whip now. With such a connate cardinal treasure, she was too lazy to make other fancy things. A high-quality item was equivalent to 10 or 100 others. Li Guo and her clansmen stopped purifying and floated to the shore. They looked tired and sat down to rest. Ning Shu took out a few fruits for Li Guo and sat beside her. These fruits were from the void. Although the creatures in the void were powerful, they also needed energy and food. She believed that Li Guo would also eat these things. Li Guo took the fruits and casually took 2 bites. Why are you looking for me? Ning Shu's expression was very surprised and exaggerated. You can't tell. Li Guo laughed and was a little impatient. Just say it. I remember that our relationship wasn't very good. Ning Shu took out the necklace. This is for you. Li Guo looked at the necklace and asked, You weren't willing before. Why are you willing now? Seeing you purify the Sea of Law so painstakingly, I'm very touched. I shouldn't have quarreled with you over a nomological imprint. Let's forget about our enmity with a smile. Li Guo looked at Ning Shu suspiciously and said, "Why should we forget about our enmity?" with a smile. "Do you know how many things I've lost?" Her identity was almost taken away, and she didn't borrow the seed. Now, she was painstakingly purifying the sea. Ning Shu sighed. "Of course I know. I just want to compensate you. Haven't you always wanted this? I'll give it to you. You can decide the price." Li Guo looked at Ning Shu faintly. "Since it's an apology, why are you asking me for something? Is this a deal?" Ning Shu whispered in Li Guo's ear, "That guy in the windbreaker is watching. If I don't take something from you, with his character of only taking in and not taking out, will he let the two of us have a good time?" Li Guo had probably been cheated by the grand uncle many times. She actually agreed with Ning Shu's words. She nodded and asked, "What do you want?" "Then we'll do as you said." "Give me an energy body," Ning Shu said. Li Guo said, "It's not an energy body. This energy is not an energy body." Ning Shu nodded. "I know. It's the energy that your race brought from the womb." Li Guo smiled slyly. "I can only give you one piece now." Ning Shu said, "I said 5 pieces before. Forget it if you don't want it." Li Guo frowned. 5 pieces? I don't remember. I said 2 pieces before. Ning Shu said, 4 pieces. I'll exchange with you for 4 pieces. Chapter 36:18. Li Guo thought for a while and looked at the sparkling necklace. She suddenly understood. "Could it be that you can't control this thing, so you want to give it to me? So, I'm the one who saved you, and you still have the nerve to accept my gift?" Ning Shu laughed. "How can that be? Even if I can't control it, someone else can. For example, the kid in the trench coat next to me can control it. In terms of relationship, my relationship with him is better than with you." "Of course. What kind of relationship is this?" Li Guo looked at Ning Shu, then glanced at the Grand Elder. Finally, she nodded and said, "Okay, 4 pieces." Ning Shu was speechless. Actually, she would sell it for 3 pieces. This thing was useless and troublesome in her hands. She might as well give it to Li Guo. Li Guo gave Ning Shu 4 energy bodies the size of oranges. They were yellow and white in color. They exchanged the money and the goods. At the moment of the exchange, 2 words appeared in their minds. Ning Shu, idiot. Li Guo, idiot. Ning Shu held the slightly cold energy stone and couldn't help but ask, "Do people of your race have such a big stone in their bodies when they're born? Wouldn't it hurt to have such a big stone?" Li Guo said, "It's slightly bigger than this. As they grow, these energy stones will be used up and eventually run out." Ning Shu said, Then these energy stones were dug out from your people's bodies?" Li Guo rolled her eyes at Ning Shu. "What are you thinking about? Our race borrows seeds to reproduce and strengthen the population. Why would we destroy living people for a small piece of energy stone? In life, there will be all kinds of misfortunes and blessings. Some people die in accidents when they're born, so the size of the energy stones varies according to the age of the person who died." Ning Shu said. "When your people die, will they cut open their bodies to take this thing out?" It seemed that the thing in her hand was cut out from the body. Ning Shu didn't want to play with it in her hand, so she put it in the meson space. "Of course we have to take them out. Some children are born without energy, which means that they don't have a stable source of energy. These things are energy reserves." Ning Shu nodded. "How much longer do you need to purify?" When Li Guo heard this, she looked at the Grand Elder with some resentment. "Let's see how long he wants us to purify for." Ning Shu was extremely surprised. Could it be that Grand Elder really wanted Li Guo and the others to purify this lifeless, dirty, and messy sea of law into a clear and limpid one? How was that possible? Even the Grand Elder himself couldn't do it. This was simply forcing him to do it. Of course, Ning Shu wouldn't plead for Li Guo. In terms of right and wrong, Ning Shu and the Grand Elder were on the same page. If the purification was good for his Sea of Laws, he would let Li Guo and the others do their best to purify it. After all, she wasn't the one purifying it. Li Guo put away the necklace. As for the flashing lightning on it, it did not seem to do any harm to Li Guo. Li Guo's expression was normal. They were creatures of the void after all. Their skin was rough and their flesh was thick. After resting for a while, Li Guo led her clansmen to purify again. Although it seemed like they were forced, they were still doing their best to purify. Of course, there was no way to slack off with the Grand Elder beside them. After settling the matter of the Thunder Law imprint, Ning Shu should leave. The Grand Elder could guard the Sea of Laws, but she couldn't stay here. She couldn't save the Sea of Laws if she stayed here. It was purely a waste of time. She was prepared to do missions or go for a stroll in the void. Ning Shu planned to bring these 4 stones back for the little mouse to eat. If the little mouse didn't eat them, then he would let the God-striking whip eat them. Anyway, Ning Shu wouldn't be able to use these things. He couldn't give the Thunder Law imprint to Li Guo for free. Ning Shu was a little curious. Why didn't the Grand Elder stop her from trading? The Thunder Law imprint was still an item of the organization, even though it was hers now. Logically speaking, she could do whatever she wanted with it. However, if she gave it to an outsider, it would strengthen the outsider's power. Although it seemed like there was no conflict between the two races now. But who could say for sure? Ning Shu asked the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder was cold and disdainful. Why should I organize it? It doesn't affect me anyway. Ning Shu almost wanted to roll his eyes. Yes, the Thunder Law imprint was like a tickle to him. Ning Shu suspected that the Grand Elder was too lazy to waste his power to seal it, so he didn't organize it. He looked down on the Thunder Law imprint. He guessed that the original seal was to let a mission enforcer have this thing so that he could manage the Law City. However, this thing was too powerful. It could directly blast the soul into dregs, so a large part of its power was sealed. Even so, the power of thunder and lightning was still unbearable for the soul. After all, it was the bane of the soul. Ning Shu felt that he might have found the truth. Do you think they want this thing to purify themselves and have power when they're calm? Ning Shu hated it when the Grand Elder looked down on people. He really wanted to poke 2 pig nostrils with his fingers. Ning Shu asked, isn't that the case? The Pear Fruit clan only had power when they went berserk. When they were calm, they didn't have much combat power. You couldn't have your cake and eat it too. If you wanted rationality, you wouldn't have power. If you wanted power, you wouldn't have rationality. The Grand Elder said, take it back and put it in their house. Are they afraid that others will break into their house and do something to them? Ning Shu said, oh. So it's used to strengthen the sect's power. Ning Shu said faintly, a group of women and children. In this void full of beasts, they must be armed. The Grand Elder glanced at Ning Shu. Don't use the standards of ordinary women to look at them. They can't wait for others to do something to them. Ning Shu was speechless. What can you do if you don't insult people? Ning Shu looked at him with pity. You're going to die. I won't argue with you. You don't have many days left to flaunt your tongue. The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life. You won't have a good death. Ning Shu turned and left. When he returned to the system space, he threw the energy stone to the little mouse. Eat it. He didn't know how long it would take for the ice to melt. First, he gave the little mouse something to fill its stomach. The little mouse sat up as if it was going to die in the next second. It sniffed the energy stone and quickly covered its nose. Damn, why do you always make smelly things? Smelly? Ning Shu picked one up and sniffed it. It was probably dug out from the stomach of a dead person. There was a little smell. The little mouse's nose was a bit painful. A little smell was magnified in its nose. Its mouth was also picky. It deserved to be hungry. Ning Shu asked, "Do you want to eat this thing?" The little mouse shook its head. "I don't want to eat it. It stinks. I'm waiting to eat the energy." Ning Shu said, "Sure. If you don't want it, I'll throw it to the holy whip." The little mouse waved its paw indifferently. "Whatever. I don't want to eat it anyway." It didn't want to force or compromise at all. Chapter 36:19. Little Mouse didn't eat it, so Ning Shu gave the 4 energy stones to the God-beating whip. This kind of energy stone was easier to absorb. He placed it beside the God-beating whip, and the God-beating whip absorbed all 4 energy stones. The energy stones shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then disappeared. The God-beating whip was easier to take care of. It ate whatever was given. It wasn't picky, and it wouldn't say that it was taken from a dead person's stomach. Only Little Mouse had a lot of problems all day long. The God-beating whip burped, and it sounded like a burp. Then, it wrapped around the energy body. The energy that was the size of a soccer ball was now the size of a fist. The energy in its body couldn't control the God-beating whip anymore. It was tightly wrapped around by the God-beating whip, but it couldn't repel the God-beating whip. Moreover, the God-beating whip's eyes became more serious. The deep black color flickered with a faint luster, and it looked very dangerous. The scales on its body didn't open, but closed. When the scales opened, one could imagine how painful it would be to hit a person. If it hit the body, it would definitely bring out a large piece of flesh, and it would definitely be so deep that one could see the bones. If it hit the soul, it would absorb the energy for its own use. Ning Shu told Dan Qing that he was going to do a mission and hoped to strengthen his soul quickly. Moreover, there seemed to be no upper limit to the soul. Of course, the stronger the better. If he kept compressing his soul, the strength of his soul would continue to increase, and his ability to withstand suppression would be much stronger. Therefore, there were only too many souls. Ning Shu was talking to Dan Qing when suddenly, 2 hands hugged Ning Shu from behind, hugging Ning Shu's neck. These hands were delicate and white, like a child's arms. They were cute like lotus roots, and they wrapped around his neck. However, it wasn't warm, but a cold metallic feeling. Other than that, there was a tingling pain where their bodies touched, and there was a metallic feeling. Ning Shu was shocked. This was the system space, and there was actually someone else. Little Mouse was sleeping soundly beside him, and its ball-like body was sometimes big and sometimes small. Ning Shu turned around and saw a young face full of collagen. Its eyes were clear and blinking. With a bun on her head, she was grinning at Ning Shu, revealing her snow-white teeth. Ning Shu pried her arm away. "Who are you?" The little girl still smiled at Ning Shu and didn't say anything. Ning Shu asked, "Can't you speak?" Ning Shu was enlightened, and he looked at the God-striking whip. He realized that the God-striking whip was gone, and so was the energy body. "You are the deity-striking whip." The little girl bit her finger and nodded. She blinked and looked at Ning Shu. "Oh, he transformed into a human just like that?" It seemed that the God-striking whip had absorbed a lot of energy before. When the energy body was born, it had absorbed the remaining energy. In addition to the energy he had absorbed this time, it was normal for him to become an adult. Ning Shu was very happy. He pulled her over to sit on his lap. Okay. The little girl was so adorable. The little girl still smiled at Ning Shu. Her smile melted Ning Shu's heart. Ning Shu decided to teach the little girl how to speak and also to give her a name. An ugly name like Deity Striking Whip was not suitable for a little girl. Ning Shu put his hand on the little girl's leg and thought about her name. His hand accidentally brushed over the child's indescribable place. Feeling that the feeling was a little strange, he slid his hand back and pressed on that spot. The little girl bit her finger and tilted her head to look at Ning Shu with a confused expression. Ning Shu, I have a bad feeling. Ning Shu suddenly lifted her skirt and screamed, I. Fuck, 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 fuck. This child was probably the youngest crossdresser. Ning Shu clamped his hands under the boy's arms and lifted him off his legs to stand in front of him. The child didn't know what was going on and wanted to squeeze into Ning Shu's arms, but Ning Shu pressed down on his shoulder. Ning Shu asked, why are you wearing such clothes? His hair was combed into 2 buns. Just by looking at his appearance, it was really hard to tell whether he was a man or a woman. The crossdresser looked at Ning Shu in confusion and thought for a moment before pointing at Ning Shu's clothes. Clearly, he had copied Ning Shu's appearance. Ning Shu, then why didn't you grow up like a girl? Ning Shu felt that living creatures generally grew up in the direction of men. For example, the heart. Although it seemed to be a little like a chick before, it didn't grow up according to her appearance and gender. Even Liren, who looked like her, was still a fucking man. Perhaps a man's body was a body full of strength. Even on the path of humanization, one would choose to develop in the direction of strength. The ups and downs of emotions were just so fucked up. Ning Shu was a little confused and said, you're a boy, don't wear a skirt. The child didn't understand and looked at Ning Shu in confusion. He probably didn't understand why Ning Shu's attitude changed so quickly. Ning Shu patted his head. Forget it, whether it was a boy or a girl, he would still be able to transform into a human form. That was another step forward. It was better than a cold metal lump. Wear whatever you like. Who said that men can't wear skirts? We can wear whatever we want. Those secular labels had nothing to do with them. Although he didn't know what was wrong with Ning Shu or what he was saying, he felt that Ning Shu's mood had improved again. He opened his arms and threw himself into Ning Shu's arms. His 2 arms wrapped around Ning Shu's neck. Ning Shu patted his back gently. This child would follow him to the ends of the earth in the future. The little mouse was awakened by Ning Shu's scream. He turned around and saw the child. He couldn't help but ask, whose child did you steal? Seeing the child hugging Ning Shu tightly, he said disdainfully, what an eyesore. Ning Shu slapped Little Rat's body, and the little girl copied Ning Shu's action and slapped Little Rat's body as well. The little mouse was very unhappy after being slapped twice in a row. What are you doing? You don't even let me speak. Ning Shu said, don't talk so much. He is the Holy Whip. That's why he transformed into a human. He doesn't know anything. Don't use your dirty thoughts to judge others. The little mouse looked at the position of the Holy Whip and was a little doubtful. Really? He's so ugly. Ning Shu was unhappy. No matter how ugly he is, he's not as ugly as you. Don't say nonsense in front of the child. Besides, this child is very good-looking and cute. The little mouse suddenly felt that he was very pitiful. No one cared about him, no one loved him, and he was always bullied. Previously, he was bullied by Ning Shu, a petty woman. Now, there was one more person. He completely lost his status. The little mouse found the child particularly unpleasant to the eye. He couldn't help but say, do we have to take this child everywhere we go in the future? He's not a child. At most, his thoughts are a little chaotic. His fighting instincts are still there. Don't look at this child with the standard of an ordinary child. Because he transformed into a human, his strength increased greatly. Chapter 36:20. The little mouse snorted coldly. It was particularly unhappy that one of them was trying to curry favor with another in front of others every day. It was especially disgusting. It couldn't stay in this place any longer. It wanted to find Li Wen. Ning Shu was a little tired of being hugged by the child. She couldn't stand it and said to him, "Sit properly." The 3 or 4-year-old child looked at her in confusion. Ning Shu hugged him and put him on the side. The child reached out to hug Ning Shu's neck again. Ning Shu shook her head. No. He didn't understand and insisted on hugging Ning Shu. Ning Shu said it a few times, but he didn't understand and still opened his arms to hug. Ning Shu was helpless and could only let him hug her neck. As soon as he hugged Ning Shu, he smiled and laughed silently. He didn't make any sound. Ning Shu couldn't help but pinch his mouth open. Did he have a tongue? Why couldn't he make any sound? She pinched his lips open and saw that he had a tongue. Ning Shu said, "Ah, learn from me." The child followed Ning Shu and said, "Ah. Take it slow." First, he had to give the child a name. After much consideration, Ning Shu decided that she must give the child a resounding name that would resound like thunder. Fa Tian. This name was good. Ning Shu admired his talent. Ning Shu said to him, "From now on, you'll be called Fa Tian, Fa Tian." The little mouse rolled its eyes. "That's terrible. It hurts my ears. What does it have to do with you?" Ning Shu glanced at it. The little mouse felt hurt. It snorted and asked, "Has the ice brick melted? I want to eat the energy body." Ning Shu couldn't help but say, "Why are you arguing with a child? You're still an elder. Why are you bickering with a junior? Adults have to be magnanimous." Little mouse, he, Ning Shu felt that his neck was very tired. Being hugged by Fa Tian like this was really tiring. Moreover, there was an additional little thing, which really made people speechless. Ning Shu pushed Fa Tian's hand away, stood up, took his hand and said, "Let's go. I'll take you out for a walk." If he continued to hug her like this, his neck would break. Looking at his hand being held by Ning Shu, Gaishan broke into a wide grin. His eyes were filled with admiration. The little mouse looked at the two of them and asked, "Where are you going?" Ning Shu said, "I'm going to see if the ice bricks have melted." The little mouse immediately said, "I'll go too." Ning Shu took the two little tails to Fire City. The temperature in Fire City was very hot. Even if it was residual power of law, it was still very hot. Fa Tian didn't feel anything unusual at all. He looked at Ning Shu and smiled brightly at Ning Shu. Ning Shu also smiled and muttered in his heart. It would be great if she was really a cute little loli. When they arrived at the city lord's mansion, a wave of heat hit them in the face. Looking at the magma in the middle of the city lord's mansion, the ice brick was still the same ice brick. The magma was bubbling, but it still couldn't melt the ice brick. Ah Wan had been guarding this ice brick, which made Ning Shu feel a little uneasy. Ning Shu said to Ah Wan, "You don't have to keep guarding it. In fact, this thing isn't easy to melt. Don't look at it as just a small ice brick. In fact, there's a very vast world inside, an entire world of glaciers." Ah Wan was stunned for a moment. It's so big. No wonder it hasn't melted. The thick layer of ice covering the outside hadn't melted yet, and the inside was even more glaciers. Only when the outside melted would the inside slowly melt. Such a large ice mountain, after it melted, the world would definitely be filled with water. If he let Ah Wan keep guarding it, he didn't know how long she would have to guard it. This would delay Ah Wan's time. Ah Wan said, "Then I'll come back to take a look after completing the mission." Ning Shu nodded. "Okay, you're just wasting time here." Ah Wan looked at the child Ning Shu was holding and couldn't help but ask, "Where did this child come from?" "A very cute little girl." Ning Shu. "It's a long story." Little Mouse said directly, "It's not a little girl, it's a boy." Ah Wan's expression was also a little complicated. She looked at Ning Shu with some condemnation. Since it's a boy, you shouldn't dress like this. This will make the child's gender confused. Ning Shu. You might not believe it, but he's a newborn baby now. He doesn't have any thoughts. He didn't have any concept of a boy or a girl at all. Who the hell knew why this child was wearing a dress? Maybe he was copying her, but he had grown up. Ah Wan wanted to pinch Fa Tian's face, but Fa Tian hid behind Ning Shu. Ah Wan didn't care about Fa Tian's attitude. She smiled and said, "So cute. Let the child wear suitable clothes. I'll give them to you next time." Ning Shu didn't refuse. Of course, it was good for someone to give him something. Although it was just clothes. Ah Wan left to complete the mission. After all, her soul was very weak now. She had to complete the mission. Ning Shu looked at Little Mouse anxiously looking at the ice brick. He felt very depressed. Sang Liang's ice mountain had already melted, but theirs was still an ice brick. The difference was a little big. If they looked for Sang Liang and the others, they would probably be exploited again. Originally, they had to hand over half of it, and they didn't know how much would be left. If they looked for them again, there probably wouldn't be much left. Especially if they gave some to Little Mouse. At least, it wasn't something that could be sent away with one piece. To be honest, it was Little Mouse who made a great contribution to be able to get these. With her strength, there was no way she could withstand the cold. So even if it took a little longer, they couldn't look for Sang Liang and the others. They had plenty of time to wait. They believed that Little Mouse would also wait. Wait with an empty stomach. Now, Little Mouse didn't even eat the world's origin and fragments. It just waited with an empty stomach to eat energy bodies. Ning Shu brought Fa Tian to the shop to get his clothes measured. Seeing him wearing a dress, Ning Shu couldn't forget the little thing he saw. He let him wear boys' clothes. That way, he wouldn't think of his little bird when he saw him. Fa Tian was very shy. Just by looking at him, who would think that he was a fierce god-beating whip that could absorb other people's energy for his own use? Sure enough, a human's appearance was the most deceptive. When the clothes were done, Ning Shu helped him put on the clothes and said, "Fa Tian, your name is Fa Tian." Fa Tian. Fa Tian learned with difficulty. It wasn't standard. Ning Shu was a little tired. She had to raise a child, shape his 3 views, and teach him how to understand the world. So, she didn't like children very much. The pressure was very great. Ning Shu wanted to give the child to the earthworm, but Fa Tian was her weapon. He needed to be with her at all times. It wouldn't be right to give him to someone else. She accepted her fate. If it was a little girl, a considerate little cotton-padded jacket, she might be happier. Fa Tian looked at the clothes on his body and then looked at Ning Shu's clothes. He obviously didn't understand why he had to wear this. Ning Shu felt that it was rather troublesome to explain, so he simply said, "You look good in this." Chapter 36-21. After changing the child's clothes, she thought for a moment and picked up his long hair. He looked like a cute boy. Fa Tian touched his hair and looked at Ning Shu's hair. Obviously, he was mourning for his hair. Ning Shu praised, "Very handsome, very good-looking." Little Mouse felt that his teeth were about to fall out and he had goosebumps all over his body. "Can you not be so disgusting? I vomit every time I see it." Ning Shu said, "It's none of your business. If you don't like it, don't look." Little Mouse rolled his eyes. Ning Shu touched the child's head and had a flash of inspiration. "Today is the day you are born. I'll take you to meet those old men." Since he was an elder, he should give the younger generation some gifts. What a good day. She had been thinking about what name to use to hold another banquet. Now, this child was the name. She had a child now. She had to prepare some belongings for the child. Where would she get these belongings? Of course, she would take the child to eat with the family. And it was a Khanate ultimate treasure. This was something worth celebrating. No matter what this old man gave, it was to save some belongings for the child. Ning Shu was all smiles, looking very pleased. Little Mouse said, "I'll go too. I'll ask them to give me something too." Little Mouse didn't expect such a good thing and immediately volunteered himself. Ning Shu. "Sorry, you'll be too ugly when you grow up." "Impossible." Little Mouse still wanted things. How could it be? He didn't kill this guy because he was valuable. Shamelessly asking for things, he wanted to be chopped up. He used to attack planes for no reason, but now he was asking for things. He was tired of living. Little Mouse, fuck, isn't this guy also an item from the void? Why can he ask for things but I can't? Ning Shu couldn't be bothered with Little Mouse. He had no self-awareness at all. He probably didn't think there was anything wrong with attacking planes and getting some food. There was nothing wrong with people eating plants and animals. It was the one standing at the top of the food chain, so what? Ning Shu looked at Little Mouse's proud expression and said, "Yes, you're awesome. If they don't give you anything, what can you do?" Little Mouse pursed his lips. "Do you think they'll give it to you just because you go? Are you that shameless?" Ning Shu stretched out his hand. "As an elder, shouldn't you give something to the younger generation?" Little Mouse was all alone and had nothing. He was still hungry. When Ning Shu asked for food, he was so embarrassed that his fur turned red. "Do you think I'm your elder just because you say so? There's no such thing in the void. How shameless are you to ask for things like that?" The little mouse had nothing on him. He had no money and no one. He was just a pauper. Little Mouse snorted and ignored Ning Shu as it returned to the system space. "You want face, but you don't want to give me anything. You want to block the name of an elder? Dream on. Childish, superficial, and laughable." He lowered his head and saw Fa Tian looking up at him. His big eyes blinked. His eyelashes were very long, making his eyes look watery and pure. He had to admit that this child was really beautiful. He just didn't know if he would grow up badly. If he grew up according to this child would be very beautiful in the future. He had delicate features and was very cute. He just didn't know if he would be like Liren. When he thought of Liren, Ning Shu felt a headache coming on. Ning Shu brought Fa Tian to the Chongsam man's restaurant and said to Fa Tian, "Later, when I point at someone, you will call them uncle. Learn from me, uncle." One name could address many people. Uncle, 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 uncle. Fa Tian kept repeating these two words. He didn't know what they meant. Ning Shu walked into the restaurant and ordered more expensive and exquisite dishes. He gave the spoon to Fa Tian. Fa Tian definitely didn't know how to use chopsticks. He wanted Fa Tian to learn how to eat these things. Ning Shu didn't know if Fa Tian could eat these ordinary things, but he saw him clumsily use the spoon to put the food into his mouth. He even used his hands to grab it. Ning Shu wiped Fa Tian's mouth with a handkerchief and said, "You have to be hygienic. After eating, you have to wipe your mouth with a piece of paper." Fa Tian looked at Ning Shu in confusion. Ning Shu sighed. No matter how much he said, he wouldn't understand. If he did, he would understand. The waiter went upstairs to call the Chongsam man down. The Chongsam man came downstairs with a folding fan. When he saw his face full of sauce, he asked, "Where did this child come from?" "My child. My weapon transformed. I brought him here to help you find the way, in case you don't know and bully my child," Ning Shu said. The Chongsam man was speechless. Child, weapon transformed? This was a bit too much information. What kind of weapon could transform? Was it very powerful? Why hadn't he heard of it before? The Cheongsam man squeezed the folding fan in his hand. Could it be that the fan in his hand could also transform into a human? The Cheongsam man looked at Fa Tian. It was hard to imagine that a cold weapon could transform into a human. Why would I bully a child? The Cheongsam man said. He thought for a moment and took out a jade-like item from his space. This thing is good for spiritual power. It can increase spiritual power. Give it to the child to play with. The Cheongsam man gave the item to Fa Tian. Fa Tian was very confused. He looked at Ning Shu. Obviously, he didn't understand why this person gave him something. He also didn't understand what they were talking about. Ning Shu made a shaking gesture with his hand. Take it and call me uncle. Fa Tian was very sensitive to the word uncle. He called him uncle. The Cheongsam man smiled and gave him a free meal. The Cheongsam man asked Ning Shu, what is his original form? The Cheongsam man looked at him from head to toe. He was very surprised. Ning Shu said, it's the whip that I used to hold in my hand. A lot of things happened because of this whip. The faction on the Giant Gate planet had caused a lot of trouble because of the Holy Whip. Later, the consciousness of the Holy Whip was erased. Only then did the Holy Whip belong to him. For a long time, these factions didn't cause trouble for him. It's a whip. The Cheongsam man sighed. Ning Shu told Fa Tian to stop eating. Eating too much was not good for his health. Could it be that Ning Shu wanted to move to another place now that she had something? She wiped off Ji Feishan's greasy mouth and led him away. Ning Shu came to the consultation room and touched his head. You can call me uncle later. Calling him uncle made old men like Sang Liang and Tai Shu look too young. After a while, Sang Liang came out of the room. When he saw Fa Tian, he narrowed his eyes and sat down. He asked, what do you want to ask? Ning Shu said to Sang Liang, can you call Tai Shu over? I have something important to say. He called both of them over at once. He was too lazy to look for them one by one. Besides, there were two people present. If there was competition, there would be good things. Chapter 36-22. Sang Liang said, it's the same if you tell me. Ning Shu shook his head. It's not the same. Sang Liang glanced at Ning Shu and informed Tai Shu. While waiting, Sang Liang looked at Fa Tian. Fa Tian shyly hid in Ning Shu's arms and buried his head in Ning Shu's arms. Do you want to give me this child too? Sang Liang asked. Ning Shu said, of course not. Sang Liang could see that this child wasn't human. This old man wanted to kidnap the child. Wishful thinking. Sang Liang didn't say anything. Tai Shu appeared in the consultation room and asked with a frown, what's the matter? Tai Shu sat down. When he saw Fa Tian, he waved at him. Come here. Fa Tian didn't go to Tai Shu. His little face was full of vigilance, probably because he sensed Tai Shu's danger. He wasn't like this when he faced the Cheongsam man. He probably felt that the Cheongsam man was no match for him and couldn't threaten his life. Now, he was especially vigilant in front of Tai Shu. Ning Shu said, the child was just born and is a little shy. I brought him here to show you. This is my child. Don't treat him as ownerless. Tai Shu didn't care about Fa Tian and asked, what's the matter? Ning Shu said, nothing. I just want to show you the child. Is it a connate cardinal treasure? Or is it still weak? It needs to be taken good care of. It's a part of our organization. Tai Shu glanced at Ning Shu. Pay attention to his purification. Give him more metal energy bodies. He thought for a moment and took out his black gun. The gun melted in his hand and condensed into a black oval object. He handed it to Fa Tian. Let him integrate this into his body. It can increase his toughness. Ning Shu was happy and pushed Fa Tian. Fa Tian saw the object in Taishu's hand and walked over to take it. Uncle. With the precedent set by the Chongsam man, Fa Tian shouted at the senior uncle. The Grand Elder looked at him and glanced at Ning Shu unhappily. Don't teach these simple beings the same as you. He had just been born and had just taken human form. He didn't even know how to speak, and his thoughts were still in a mess. Yet, he only knew how to call him uncle. Everyone knew what Sima Zhao was thinking. Ning Shu was speechless. The silver-haired man flipped open the cowhide book and tore out a page for Fa Tian. Fa Tian took the book and called out, "Uncle." This time, even the silver-haired man frowned. What do you take him for? Ning Shu said, I'm teaching the child manners. He doesn't know how to speak, but it's the most basic form of address. Anyway, it's not wrong to call him uncle. Ning Shu asked, what kind of treasure is this page of yours? The silver-haired man said, it's nothing good. It's just a shelter. Ning Shu said, thank you. The silver-haired man said, it's not for you. It's for him. Don't take it for yourself. Ning Shu nodded. She had never thought of taking it for herself. She had originally prepared it for Fa Tian. However, these people were much nicer to Fa Tian than to her. When the restaurant opened, they only gave some law imprints. Now that the Grand Elder had melted her spear, the silver-haired man actually gave her a page of a book. If she had been weaker, she probably wouldn't have been able to protect Fa Tian. He would have been snatched away directly. The silver-haired man asked, what's his name? Ning Shu said proudly, Fa Tian. The Grand Elder and the silver-haired man frowned at the same time. The Grand Elder was very unhappy to be called over and directly left. The silver-haired man said, 100,000 merit points. You entered the consultation room. It's calculated by time. Ning Shu didn't say anything and deducted 100,000 merit points. Compared to these things, 100,000 merit points were insignificant. Ning Shu handed over the money without hesitation. Then, she led Gaishan out of the consultation room. She muttered, where are we going next? Fa Tian looked up at Ning Shu and smiled softly and sweetly. Ning Shu put Fa Tian's things in the meson space, strung them up with a small red string, and hung them around his neck. These are all your treasures. Don't let others take them away, understand? Ning Shu was very worried that Fa Tian would be taken advantage of. Fa Tian smiled at Ning Shu. He put the necklace inside his clothes and patted his chest with his small hand. Ning Shu pinched his smiling face. You're so smart. Ning Shu felt that all his patience had been spent on Fa Tian. If nothing unexpected happened, they would be together for the rest of their lives. It was the most intimate relationship, a relationship of trust and a comrade in arms. They relied on each other and grew up together. Since they were in such a relationship, they had to live in harmony. It was not that kinship was better than kinship. Ning Shu snapped his fingers and said to Fa Tian, take her to see a world with only souls. By the way, I'll take you to see a little brother. The little devil had always been very arrogant. He didn't want to pay attention to a human like Yaonyang. He was like a human looking at a little white rabbit. If he found it interesting, he would tease it. But Fa Tian was the incarnation of a primordial treasure. In terms of identity, the little devil had no advantage and could treat him as an equal. They might be able to play together. Ning Shu took Fa Tian to the world of samsara through space jump and came to the gate of a huge black palace. The palace was empty. Occasionally, skeletons came out from the black palace. Fa Tian looked at the skeletons in surprise, his eyes full of curiosity. Ning Shu led Fa Tian into the palace. The pillars of the palace were very high. The black jade floor tiles reflected people's shadows. There was a huge chair made of skeletons in the palace. The stairs were full of white bones. The empty palace echoed with people's voices. Ning Shu walked around the palace with Fat on. He believed that His Excellency must know they were here. After a long time, His Excellency came out and sat on the high chair made of white bones. He looked down at Ning Shu and asked, "What are you doing here?" The deep voice of an abyssal prefect reverberated throughout the palace, as if there were abyssal prefects speaking from all directions. Ning Shu said, "I'm here to see the child." His Excellency's attitude to her was worse than before since she had the little devil. His Excellency said directly, "The child is in closed-door cultivation. You can leave now." Ning Shu rolled his eyes. "I told you that I'll leave the child to you. I won't interfere, and I won't take the child back. Besides, I already have a child. I don't have the energy to teach another child." Ning Shu felt it was a terrible thing to have two children in front of him. Why did His Excellency think she would take the little devil back? How could it be possible? Why was His Excellency so unconfident? Let's let the two children meet. This is not an ordinary item. If they have nothing to do, they can exchange their cultivation experiences. She had a child. His Excellency shouldn't be on guard against her. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.